Welcome to the Town of Camden Select Board meeting for August 6, 2024. You can find us live on Spectrum TV cable channel 1303. You can also find us on the town YouTube channel, and we are available to participate via Zoom. If you'd like to participate via Zoom, please raise your hand, and our town manager, Audra, will bring you into our meeting. The first item on tonight's agenda is public comment on non-agenda items. Does anybody from the public have a comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda? All right, moving to agenda item number 2, which is the approval of the select board minutes for July 23rd of 2024. Are we going to?
I think that said tabled on
Tabled?
the most
Okay.
recent version of the agenda.
Okay, got it. Agenda item number 3, which is a public hearing for the November ballot to amend Chapter 290 of the Camden Code, Article 8, 290-8.8 Downtown Business District to allow residential use on the street level from multifamily dwellings in structures owned by a school administrative district. And I know that we have some representatives from the school district here tonight, but Audra, would you mind giving us an introduction for this?
Certainly. So this, we've had a couple of meetings to talk about this amendment to the zoning chapter of the code. And really, it's just specific to the Elm Street School building, which was the only building in this district that was owned by the school administrative district. And it would allow for residential on the first floor. Currently in this district, residential is the first floor needs to be commercial purpose. And I think Jeremy's got something he'd like to add.
Yeah, Jeremy, come on up, please.
Yeah, can I just add, Audra? Since the property is in the Chestnut Street Historic District, B1 normally does not allow any residential use except for the minimum needed for access. But since it's in a historic district, Chestnut Street, it does allow currently 1 and 2 family to be on the first floor as well, but you can't do the multifamily. So that's what this proposal is. It applies to multifamily. I just want to clarify what Audra was saying.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
Planning board did hold a public hearing on this, and they approved it 5-0. And as you folks know, the Historic Preservation Committee or Historic Resources Committee did review it and held a joint meeting with you folks and discussed it a couple of times. And we did bring it up, was it a month ago? I think we had another discussion about it at this meeting. So
thank you.
and I think there are some school folks here to talk on the proposal.
That's right.
Yep.
And as far as the process that the board has gone through for this, we wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for robust public input. And I think at this point, especially after tonight, we've satisfied that criteria, and we'll be ready to make a decision whether or not to send this to the November ballot. Having said that, I know that we have some representatives from the school district. Would any of you like to come up and say something on about this particular project?
Hi, everybody. Marcus Maroka. I'm a member of the Camden Rockport School Board and chair of the 5-Town CSD School Board. And our superintendent, Maria Libby, is with the administrative team. And so I am representing us tonight. But, as we've already heard tonight, this has been discussed a number of times with different committees and the select board. What we see is this as an innovative solution to a growing problem. It's no surprise that we have a housing shortage, and it is especially acute for, getting teachers to come to our community. We are really lucky, unlike a lot of other towns. We have no shortage of applications for teachers wanting to come teach in our great schools. But to keep having great schools, we need great teachers, and it's becoming increasingly hard for those great teachers to find a place to live sometimes we're down to days before a school year starts and somebody might have to pull out because they can't find housing. And this is not only kind of cost, but also being able to find stuff. So we think that we can breathe new life into this building, solve a housing crisis. People can come here, live there for a year or two, get settled, find, we all know it's hard to find, even navigate the rental market here, unless you're here and you're meeting people and you're figuring out where to find things. So, it seems like a win-win for the building, for this workforce issue, for the preservation of this historic building, and for the town, to have this building at the gateway of our main downtown development, to be a real beacon and welcome to the town. So happy to answer any questions about our proposal, but we hope you'll let voters decide on this ordinance change.
Thank you, Marcus. Anybody from the board have any comments or questions for Marcus?
I have a couple of questions that people have asked me. Maybe this has been answered, but will the playground remain? That seems to be a really important feature.
Our intention is to keep the playground. It'll probably be an even better playground, yes. But the grounds, our plan will be to upkeep the grounds, have the playground available to the community. That is the plan.
And the other question was, somebody asked me about property taxes. Thank you. Jeremy, do you have the answer?
I do. Thank you. I did speak with Carrie Leishman, the town assessor, and it would be taxable at that point when it does go into rental property housing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Susan, did you have a question or comment?
I did. I was speaking with a teacher, and she said, I wonder if there will be, like renting from the school board,
Yeah.
or will there be a management company that is sort of like the company store? It's a little
Right.
bit.
Our intention is to hire a property manager to oversee the day-to-day, yes.
Allison?
That was a really nicely stated summary. Just thinking about some of the questions that people have asked me too. I think this will go to the planning board, right? Once the site plan is, just in terms of question, my sense is that there will be an opportunity for people to talk about the lighting or the playground or some of the more detailed aspects of it.
It won't go under site plan review. It will go through subdivision because it's for sale or lease. These units are for lease, for rent. So it would go through subdivision approval, but not site plan approval. They're still bound by all the approval criteria and performance standards that are in our zoning code.
For those of us who are not intimately familiar with the difference between the subdivision process and the site plan review process, is that still the opportunity for
It is
people
the
that want to
opportunity.
say, like, where are these people going to park? And can you make sure that this tree stays, and I understand not everything that comes up during site plan or subdivision review is necessarily something that the applicant is,
Bound to.
legally bound to consider, but sometimes
Yep.
it is an opportunity for people to say,
Yep.
I especially like this,
Yeah, that's a good point. The
or-
planning board can make subdivision approval with conditions. I would add like the Nordhaven subdivision that was approved on Belfast Road. There was a condition of an abutter had a concern about a visual impact. There was no requirement to do a buffer. But the planning board did make it a condition to do a buffer between that and an abutting property owner. So the planning board can add conditions to an approved subdivision plan.
and then the school board is going to have its own process. I'm imagining this is going to go on for quite a while. You're going to be doing
Right.
some fundraising. They're going to be, and if it does get to the point where it needs any kind of taxpayer funding, that will be another proposal that has to go out to voters. So
Correct.
this isn't the last chance for people to have input in the project, I guess is what I'm kind of.
No, and
verifying.
I would just say that this is, in our mind, kind of a crucial step to be able to finalize some of the planning here, and so that we can get to those other conversations and have a more firm footing on, finalizing plans with our architect on what this would look like, the cost. Our intention remains not to increase taxpayer burden any further so we would use probably a combination of our capital reserve, largely fundraising, and perhaps a loan that would be paid back through the rental income that we get over the years.
If there is any federal funding involved, which I don't believe there is any intention to, but if there is, they would need to go through a historic review process with the State Historic Preservation Commission. Just throwing that out. And also, I think it's important to know when you do a zone change or when the community votes on a zone change and it gets approved, it doesn't mean that the use happens, right? It just is an allowed use. So at some point down the road, if the school gets into this so deep and then they realize the funding doesn't work, it doesn't mean, it will turn into multifamily necessarily. It just gives them the opportunity to do multifamily. Make sense?
Chris?
Two questions. One, is it truly only for teachers to live there? And is there an established criteria for either what teachers can live there? If you have more teachers than rooms, how are you going to determine that fairly?
Yeah, so for your first question, it would be for teachers and administrators. Those are generally the positions where people move a distance to come here. We don't see that kind of change. A bus driver is probably not going to move from Ohio to here just to become a bus driver in Camden. For the second question, we would devise a policy. Most likely, it would be kind of first come, first serve, and there would be some sort of wait list. But I think that's kind of getting ahead of things, and we'd work that out.
Marcus and Jeremy, I have a question about the wording of the potential ballot question itself, which is to allow residential use on the street level, multifamily dwellings in structures owned by a school administrative district.
Yeah.
So in Camden, are there any other structures that are owned by a municipal district, school administrative district that could be construed as potential
No.
for this use?
There are not.
Okay. If the school district was to
Buy one.
identify this as a successful model and they purchased another building,
Good point.
what would the implications be there?
Then it would apply. If you've ever perused through our zoning ordinance, you'll find all sorts of dates all over the place. It's not something that planners like to do or lawyers like to deal with, but land use lawyers, but we can add a provision in here that are owned, shall not apply to structures that are owned by a school administrative district that was owned by the district as of a certain date. We can do that.
Do we want to do that? Is this something that we might want to allow the school district some special leeway in general? I mean, this is a question that I'm putting to the public and to the board. That let's say this was a successful model. Do we want to put the restriction on it now, or do we want to allow the school district extra leeway just because we clearly are allowing them extra leeway in this particular case?
I mean, this is such a unique scenario that I think that taking it on a case-by-case basis rather than trying to make some sort of blanket policy at this point, there's no foreseeing another scenario that would meet this very unique set of criteria. I don't see, that we need to be looking ahead to something preventing or allowing at this point.
So Susan, you're suggesting we do add restrictive language to this to say that this,
I'm saying that the language that's in it is sufficient for the case that we have in front of us right now.
okay. Allison?
I think that there would be another mechanism for public input if the school were to find this to be so successful that they want to acquire additional property, that the mechanism to control that is already in place because they would need to seek approval to do that. And so that's where the conversation could happen.
Do you
I
mean
don't think that-
approval from the school board, or do you mean approval from the town or
From
planning
from
board?
voters, I can't think of a scenario where they would be able to acquire, if somebody gifted you property, do you have to go to voters? There are a lot of rules about what the school can.
I mean, first of all, we're definitely not in the business of trying to go find other properties to buy. If we were to be gifted something, I don't know offhand what the policy states on like how big it needs to be before we do something with it about it. But like, you know,
That'd be cool
There
though,
would be a
if somebody,
process.
if
Yeah.
somebody just because of this were like, I'm going to gift this property to the school
Hey.
district just because I saw this zoning ordinance and I want to help affordable housing for teachers in Camden. I don't know if I'd want to stand in the way of that, but I don't think it's very likely.
I was just asking, I
Yeah,
was
it's a
kind
good
of.
question.
yeah.
And again, I don't like to do things with dates in the code. I mean, it's all over the place. That's like really spot zoning. Like you've talked about spot zoning in the past. It's all over our code. I mean, one way you could do it if you wanted to go down that road, shall not apply to structures that were in existence and owned by the school administrative district as of 8/1/2024. That way, it applies to existing structures that are owned by the school district as of August 1st.
Sure. When I first, when this issue first became before us, I thought the way it would read eventually was map such and such, lot such and such, which is owned by a school administrative district. But no, that's not how
You
that
don't do
happens.
zoning ordinances that way.
Okay.
I thought we're supposed to be calling it the Code of Ordinances now and not the,
Code of ordinances, I'm sorry.
Audra keeps correcting everybody. I just wanted to.
Does anybody from the public would like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move back to further board deliberations. Board, any other questions or comments before we make a motion?
I would just like to reiterate my previous comment regarding this, which is that we are a community that prides ourselves in the quality of the education experience that we offer. And families move here in order for their children to attend our schools. And this, to me, is putting our money where our mouth is and creating an opportunity for the school to be active in providing housing. So I'm fully in favor. Thank you.
Allison?
I'm excited about it too, and I'm going to vote to support it. I do think that the concern overall about conversion of commercial properties and public spaces into residential uses is a concern, and that it's been a bad thing for Camden overall. And I see this as different, and definitely potentially even more different in a better way. But the main problem is that people end up living downtown, and then they complain about the noise of all the other, vibrant uses that we want to have down here. And so I think that because it's going to be owned by the school district, there's going to be an opportunity to really make sure that it's communicated like that living in one of these downtown apartments isn't right for everybody. It's going to be, hopefully we'll be seeking out tenants that sort of add to that vibrancy and aren't opposed to it. So I think it's a unique opportunity to do that, and that the playground will add to that too. So thank you for doing all this work. I know it's not fun proposing new things, so.
Comments, questions, motions?
I would move to approve the amendment to the, what do you want me to say?
If you just want to read it, Susan, that's best.
You could read it from the agenda.
Oh, okay. So I would move to approve the November ballot amendment of Chapter 290 of the Camden Code, Article 8, Chapter 298-8 Downtown Business District, to allow residential use on the street level for multifamily dwellings in structures owned by a school administrative district.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you all who came from the school. Item number 4 on tonight's agenda is select board reports. Susan, do you want to start us off tonight?
Nothing particular to report apart from how thrilled and delighted I was to be attending the celebration at the wastewater treatment plant. Who knew? Um, I'm just so blown away by the quality of the facility, but above all and overall, the professionalism of the staff is just outstanding, and the level of detail and proficiency with all of the details. I mean, I just at one point just asked Justin, we were looking at this big computer display, and I just said, just pick out a data point and explain to me what that means. And it was like it was Christmas morning for him. He was so thrilled, and his just facility with every aspect, and Dave and the other
Sheldon.
and yeah, amazing, just amazing. I'm so thrilled that we had that opportunity to share it with the USDA folks. It was really a proud moment for the town. And Tom, you did an outstanding job speaking for the board. I was quite impressed. If you haven't been there or seen it, get over there. That you would be welcomed. And it's really a gem for Camden. I'm quite impressed.
Ken, anything tonight?
No, the Historic Resources Committee will come up later on the agenda, so I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. Allison?
Only that the good news, we got the word from Janice that Gary Fowley can indeed be on the Pathways Committee, because I guess it's 5 members from Camden and 3 alternates. So room for Gary as an alternate. So there's no getting out now. And I also really enjoyed the wastewater presentation, and remember a time when I was in school and we would do tours of the wastewater plants. And what I've heard is that they continued, their policy is that they're open to tours, but that the schools have stopped asking and people have stopped asking. So maybe if we could organize, an advertised public tour at some point, that would be a fun thing for everybody.
Thank you. Chris, anything tonight?
No, I don't have anything further.
Okay. I'd like to echo about the wastewater treatment facility as well. I think the big deal, especially about it, is being impressed on how well it's run. And Dave, you and your staff certainly made an impression on everyone who were there last week. But also the impact it has on Camden. And we talk a lot about environmental issues. But this one is below the radar, like a very, very big deal for us. It cleans the water to a standard that we've never had before in Camden, and that is water that is deposited into Camden Harbor, of course, which we would, in the long run, we'd like to change that. But it's a significant improvement for us, and it's the foundation for the improvement of all of our wastewater collection system. Without this plant upgrade, all the I&I improvements that we want to do would be marginally less improvement. With this foundation, we actually have the ability to build from there. So it's a big deal. And to the people who got us those grants, thank you. And all the people who worked hard on them, which we said last week. But still, it bears repeating, and it's nice to say it in public. In addition, I just want to report that I did receive an email from the district attorney, and she indicated to us and to the rest of the board that she wouldn't be pressing charges on the Lake Beach poisoning. I was disappointed about that for certain, but she did state that the district attorney still has a bite at it. And excuse me, thank you, Susan. The Attorney General, the Attorney General may still be pursuing a case, but it's really, we don't have knowledge right now whether that is happening or not. But at this point, the district attorney is not pursuing anything criminal regarding to Lake Beach and Lake Park and the Camden Harbor poisoning. And my final thing tonight, I say with a little bit of a sad heart that this is going to be my last meeting as chair of the select board. I am stepping down as chair to focus more on some family things, particularly a son that I have in Europe, and I want to spend more time with him. So it's time to pass this mantle on to one of my great colleagues. And it really has been an honor to be in this seat. But I leave knowing that the board will be in great hands. We have a great board up here, very collegial board, people who are very thoughtful. And it really has been an honor to serve with all of you. And I look forward to continuing to be a member of the board and sometimes attending board meetings from a distance. So. Item number, and to finish that thought up, we will be electing a new board chair at our next meeting on August 20th. Item number 5 on
And I
tonight's.
think, just to be clear, that that's as of August 20th as well. So you are still the board chair until
Correct.
the 20th.
Yeah, my official August 20th. Yeah. We'll make the formal change on that particular date. Town managers report.
Sure. So I had on that we really need to schedule a open house for the community for the wastewater treatment plant. It was a nice kickoff with USDA rural development people, but I think that it's really important to have an event where the community is invited, and also inviting our recently retired wastewater director, Dave Bolstrich, who was really instrumental in putting this project together and was here for a lot of the building of the new plant. So I think that that's going to be really important to, get the community in so that they can see what their support has helped us to do. Holly Anderson has accepted a position in my office as the communications coordinator. So we're currently advertising for the Parks and Recreation Director and Snowball General Manager position. And Holly's going to remain as the interim and assist the new director and general manager with a transition when that person is hired. Andy Shepard is also going to be assisting us with the recruitment and the training of the new director and general manager. But we're very excited to have Holly joining us in the administration office. It's going to be, hugely helpful to have some support with communications and other projects that sort of fall within my office. So very much looking forward to that, even though I have to be very patient while we recruit for the new position. While we recruit for the new person. So we've scheduled a workshop with John Burke, who's the consultant that did the parking study and has recently done financial analysis of expanding the paid parking program. So that will be on Thursday, August 15th, starting at 2 p.m. And so John's going to give an overview of the findings of the study, which we had a presentation on, but it was sort of towards the tail end of COVID, so it wasn't incredibly well attended. So I think it's going to be really important to go over that, just to update everybody on it and refresh everybody on what the findings were, as well as going over the financial analysis and give everybody an opportunity to ask questions about it. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Audra. Allison?
Was there possibly an update on the Rossin Avenue Bridge
Oh, yes.
construction schedule?
Yes, so I gave you the wrong time frame for when the bridge is going to be coming down and when the new bridge is going to be installed. So it'll be April timeframe for the bridge removal and June timeframe for the installation of the new bridge. So we're looking at about a 6-week window of time when there won't be a bridge in that location.
That's so much better.
That is good news.
Yes.
Thank you, Audra. Item 6A on tonight's agenda is the approval of the fiscal year 2024 carry forwards. Audra, could you give us what you'd like done here?
Yes, so carry forwards are one of those annual financial tasks, and it's funds, certain accounts where we haven't spent all the funds, where we have plans to spend them. We just haven't been able to before the end of the financial year. And so we ask to carry them forward either into that same operational account or into a reserve account. So any funds that are unspent that we don't carry forward go into the unassigned fund balance, or what we call the surplus as well. So the list that you have in front of you are all of the accounts where we'd like to carry the balance forward, and we've given you some detail on what we're planning to spend those funds on. So does anybody have any questions about any of the items?
For those that you've got listed where it says for ongoing project costs, is that the existing project on that line? Or is it a different
Yes.
project?
The existing, so a lot of,
Pearl Street damage project, it says, and there's $122,000, and it says for ongoing project costs, it's that project that it's going to.
correct, yeah. So for all the capital improvements, it's that exact project that we haven't spent it on yet.
Is that just stuff that hasn't been, the final part of it that hasn't been billed and? stuff
Yeah,
like that?
so it could be that, that project is still underway, or, we've been in the planning stage and we haven't got to construction, or there's different reasons why, we might not have spent it.
Oh, yeah, not for Pearl Street. For Pearl Street, though, it's not in the planning stage, right? It's-
Right, it's more of just the final
Bills
accounting.
coming in,
Like, we just did the final paving, that kind of thing. We're waiting for one final invoice from a contractor.
Move that we approve the carry forwards as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Well, never mind.
5-0.
But I do just have a question on the debt capital contingency line of $648,000. Is that for the items above it? Doesn't look like it adds up to $648,000.
So that contingency line, the 65,000,
648,660. Is that supposed to be the
None of
items?
those columns add up to the number.
So,
I can answer if you want,
so
Audra.
sorry, what is the
That's a fair point.
648,660 then?
Yeah, that's all of the capital improvements plus the contingency line below that. That's the 648,660.
Oh, it's just that it's not,
oh,
In the
it's,
right-
yeah, it's for that particular budgetary category, everything that's in there.
Below it then?
oh, so it's
Okay.
everything below instead of everything above, which
Okay,
is,
sorry.
Yeah,
I
it's
just
confusing.
It
no,
just-
that's a good point, yeah.
was questioning that. It's okay. Sorry.
Reverse order addition.
It was just too fast on the discussion for me to pick up on that. Sorry.
No problem. It's good to clarify. Item 6B on tonight's agenda is the approval of use of the public landing for the Windjammer Festival. Looks like we have a festival August 30th and 31st. Is there anything substantially different than past years' Windjammer festivals?
Are we doing anything better for some of the electrical? Electrical was an issue last year, wasn't it? Or was it only an issue for one item? I'm just going by memory, not because you're the electrician. I'm sorry, I didn't
Bigger,
understand what you
better.
said.
I said, did you say, are we doing anything better?
I actually was, I'm sorry, you maybe didn't hear me clearly
I
enough.
didn't.
I understand. Hold on. I asked, are we doing anything better with the electrical issues that we had last year? Last year, we had electrical issues where people were trying to get power to their individual vendor stations. And I was wondering, are we doing anything better this year for electrical?
I have purchased 2 new cubes and so yes,
Yes.
improvements, yes, yes.
Good, because
Yep.
if we can go without use of generators, that would be more awesome.
Yes, yep. So the only thing, I mean, pretty much the schedule is the same as it has been in years past. A couple of changes this year. I'm sorry, Holly Anderson, I'm representing Parks and Recreation, and we managed and put on the Windjammer Festival. And one of the major changes is that instead of holding the Schooner Talent Show on a stage in Harbor Park, we're going to be utilizing the Rotary tent that gets set up the day before and we're going to hold the talent show under the tent, which will then be followed by music on Saturday night under the tent as well. That'll be a change, and then that'll end at like 8:30, and then the fireworks are at 9. So then people that want to go over to Harbor Park to watch the fireworks, they'll have the opportunity to do that, a little bit of time. We do have the addition of a Pooches and Paddleboards stand-up paddleboard race.
Oh.
So to enter, you have to have a paddleboard, a person, and a pooch.
Oh, my.
And that's actually going to be a fun event that Maine Sport brought to us as an idea, David Perez, and they're putting that on. So we're excited to have that as sort of an additional thing happening in the harbor. And other than that, Primo Cabano will once again be the band on Saturday night at the dance. And so we're asking to have the public landing closed beginning at 9 o'clock on Thursday, August 29th. And that would run through, it will then kind of take over the public landing until 9 a.m. on Sunday. Most of the vendors will clean up on Saturday night, but there may be a few stragglers, but there's no reason to block off traffic being able to come down there on Sunday. And it really worked super well last year for both us and the police department in terms of clearing out cars that had parked there to use the whole day. And so we appreciate being able to do that.
Thanks, Holly. Can you be clear, at 9 p.m. on Thursday, correct, is when you close?
No, 9 a.m. on Thursday.
9
Yeah,
a.m.
because all the vendors and people, they start setting up their spots on Thursday.
Okay.
And then the festival opens on Friday morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Boards, any comments or questions on this?
No, that was going to be my question about the closure, because last year there was more information about specifically requesting that road closure. And so people were able to see it in writing as part of the board packet last year that they were requesting closure of the road at 9 a.m. And I didn't see that in the packet this year for that shows that publicly. So it's good that you brought it up.
Sure.
Are you?
I do have a comment, if none of my other board colleagues. I am opposed to fireworks. Are fireworks legal for private residents in Camden? No. So, and to my knowledge, this is because of the environmental impact of fireworks and probably for the way some people are opposed to them and, some pets react to them and that sort of thing. For the life of me, I don't understand why we're doing town-sponsored fireworks. I was surprised and, to be honest, disappointed that they happened on the 4th of July. It never came before the board that we were going to have 4th of July fireworks, so I was under the impression that we weren't going to have them. I only found out about it because I read it in the newspaper. I wasn't here for the 4th of July. Not that that matters much, but the impact of fireworks, if you look, all you have to do is do a quick Google search. It's significant. I mean, this is a significant amount of debris in our harbor, toxic residue that's left over from the fireworks, fire hazards that could be related to the fireworks. And I've been told that we have to have bucket patrol on Curtis Island some years. I mean, what does that mean? That's significant. It scares our wildlife. There's no doubt about that. We should be more sensitive to the birds and the fish, in my opinion. I would love to see the town come up with alternatives for fireworks at the 4th of July and at the Windjammer Festival. I really think fireworks are a remnant of the 20th century, and we need to think and move past that and be a leader in this regard. Allison?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think the fireworks are one of those things that ends up, no matter who puts them on, even if somebody else is fundraising for them, it ends up taking also a significant amount of staff time that doesn't get accounted for because people on moorings have to be relocated. Sometimes, with very little notice, people that are paying to have moorings for their boats. There's, parking exceptions that are made. There are barges that have to come in. It's this scramble every year that I feel happens mostly kind of in a hidden way, not on purpose, but it's because the general direction of the town has kind of been this momentum of having fireworks that I feel like town staff have gotten the message that they're supposed to move mountains to make sure that this can happen. And a lot of it doesn't get accounted for. And so I do think that it's important that that kind of thing specifically comes to the board. I think our ordinance gives us the ability to regulate barges. This has been talked about in the past because, you know, these big barges have to come in and it moves things around. I assume the town's not funding it specifically this year. It's privately fundraised.
Yeah, there's really no budget line for the Windjammer Festival. It's all sponsors.
But all the coordinating that happens is
It's
you.
yeah, it's the town. Yep. Yep. The town took it on, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago.
Right. So for the fireworks, is that going to be on floats or a barge?
There's a barge. Yep. There's a barge that's going to be between, I believe between Curtis Island and Dillingham Point, sort of the old traditional location.
And I think there is technically an approval process that happens for that.
Not really. There was talk of a select board policy a few years, so you could enact that policy where you approve a barge or not.
Who regulates whether or not a barge can come in that displaces mooring holders that have
Harbor
paid?
master.
So it's a harbor master discretion kind of thing.
And I don't think that the location of it actually displaces anyone. I don't think.
It's that they get told that they should move their boats if they don't want to have the fireworks land on their boats. And it's a scramble for at least a few people every year. So I guess, and I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong, Holly. I just think that when we should have conversations about this, and it should just be put in front of the board for a vote and an opportunity to, for the public to say whether they want things or not. I know it's a sort of a controversial topic, and we've gotten around it in the past by saying, well, it's no town money. It's all privately fundraised, so it's not anything that the town really gets involved in. And for a while, that kept me at peace that it's okay, taxpayer money isn't funding this. But in reality, it is, because it takes a bunch of taxpayer resources to make it happen. So I think that, you know, votes on this kind of thing are
Yeah,
important.
and I would say that the whole festival takes a lot of resources. So it's not just the fireworks. So I think you need to, it would be great to look at the whole festival itself and the resources that are involved in putting it on. And I would say, I don't have an opinion either way about the fireworks. But if the select board or if the community is interested in not having fireworks for next year, it would be really beneficial to let us know, well, not necessarily me, but the boats, the schooners that sell and advertise for trips for fireworks, to make a decision early on in the season so that they don't advertise and sell these trips. Will be the only, it doesn't impact the festival per se, but it would impact those boats and what those businesses are trying to do for that event. And so just make decision early on so we can get the word out early to them before they promote it, would be the only request.
And I think the same is true of the 4th of July, just having, some sort of direction so that everybody knows, from the early on in the year, what they can do or should do would be really helpful. Like sort of like a clear policy direction from the select board on fireworks. Because I think it's just gotten kind of muddled as to, what everybody would like us to do and accommodate. And, it's the same with some of the organizations that are really motivated to have fireworks and go out and do the fundraising. I think, it's just the clarity around what is acceptable in terms of the policy everybody wants us to follow.
That's a good point. some people certainly do enjoy fireworks, and it's probably the 30% rule of everything, where 30% like it, 30% don't care, and 30% don't like those. But it would be good to get public input, to know what the deal is, because it's not only pets, but it's also vets that, some who have been in live fire exercises of a sort might not really appreciate that experience as well.
Absolutely.
But it's a good point that you brought up, Holly, about schooners selling tickets to go and to be part of that in the view. And there is a large percent of the population who enjoys fireworks for the spectacle that they are.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's an expensive 15 minutes.
I hadn't really thought about it until your comments, Tom. It's an opportunity for us as a community to demonstrate some leadership in terms of really looking at the environmental impact and the impact on the taxpayer. But it's the kind of thing that whenever there are fireworks and people post pictures on their Facebook page of the fireworks, and there are always comments of saying, my dogs were freaking out, and that comes up all the time. And I think the wildlife on so many different levels are adversely impacted, even though it's 15 minutes. It may be an opportunity for us to set an example as a community. And I'm not saying, I think there's got to be a way to sort of take the temperature of the community and see how people feel about it. Not unlike the pesticide issue, are we going to take a leadership role in saying we want to promote clean water by minimizing pesticide application on the lawns and coming up with a policy about it? I like the idea of us, setting an example and thinking bigger about the impact that we're having. And yeah, it's fun. But is it forward thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there's debris that every year that washes up on the shores, and a lot of the time there's an effort to pick it all up. Some of it sinks. All of the chemicals that are used to create those colors, they go into the air and they go into the water, and it's actually more measurably significant than I had realized in the past. And one of those issues where kind of like the more you learn, the more you think, wow, is this really a representation of our other values?
I know that the environmental impact is significant. And I have a question, maybe it's for Jeremy or Audra. What would it take to make our code consistent, our fireworks code consistent, which is same for the public as it is for the private? No.
So this was talked about a few years ago, and from what I understand, when consumer fireworks were legalized in Maine, communities became motivated to pass ordinances that banned the use of sale and use of consumer fireworks within their communities. However, when it comes to the commercial fireworks, that's always been regulated by the state fire marshal's office. That being said, it does, there's no doubt about the fact that it takes a lot of town resources to put on a fireworks show. So there's the administrative approvals, the fire department is always involved for obvious reasons, and they're the ones who initially get they get notice of the permit, or hopefully sometimes that hasn't always happened, but in theory, they're supposed to get notice. Because it draws crowds, the police department has to be involved. So I think that, we don't necessarily have to amend anything in the code to say that this isn't what you want to do. Like if we're told that as a community, you don't want to facilitate commercial fireworks shows, like we see harbor master, police chief, fire chief, administration, there are ways that it's not going to happen if it's not supported by the town either formally or informally.
When it's over the harbor, right? Or is it different if somebody wanted to do something out at somewhere that's not town-owned, just a private?
That's
They
cool.
could do that. They would hire someone like Maine Pyrotechnics to come out and do a fireworks show on private property. That's not consumer retail fireworks. So if the town is serious about it, I think there would be a code amendment to prohibit the use of not only just the consumer, which we have currently, but commercial applications of fireworks.
And that code amendment would go to voters.
Uh-huh.
And Chief, I see you're in the audience tonight, and we can pass him a microphone, but what's your opinion on private commercial fireworks shows?
Feels like the majority of them were helping put on.
Thanks, Tom. Like Jeremy said, if somebody at the lake wanted to have a fireworks show, we don't really have any input over that. They have to go to they would have to hire a contractor, Central Maine Pyro or somebody like that. They go to the fire marshal's office, get a permit. They can do it.
Over woodland, over grassland?
Correct.
They don't need a permit from the fire department whatsoever.
Can
Fire
they
date-
launch from a float on McGonagall Lake, which we also don't regulate, I think.
I mean, the quality of the water in the lake would be a significant detriment to the quality, anywhere. If you look this up, it's significant. And we have alternatives. I mean, we could do a band concert. We could take that money and do something fun that's also festive, and we could do a laser show. I mean, I know that has some environmental impact, but it's significantly less.
I know Sophie and I looked at drone shows in the past, and along with Eric Anderson, and they're pretty costly. I think that's the hurdle that needs to be.
Sure. Well, I mean, we do have some people who are very, we all love the Windjammer Festival. Maybe there's opportunities there if we present it as an environmentally friendly way of celebrating what we do in this town and our heritage in this town. Maybe we could get, it's possible, maybe more donors. I don't know.
Thank you for bringing this up. I think it's,
Yeah,
There's a big laser show going on this weekend, I believe, at the Clinton Fairgrounds. They do it 2 nights, and it's drawing quite a crowd, as I understand. And it's a revenue generator. People pay to go see it and watch it. Just throwing it out there because they are happening more and more in the state of Maine, the laser shows instead of fireworks.
Sure.
That, actually, I enjoy attending some of the events myself. It's nice to see the activity going on in that space.
Yeah, I don't want to
Setting the fire,
right, the Windjammer Festival is really cool.
I don't want to
Thank you.
overemphasize the negative.
Right.
We all
Yeah.
love the Windjammer Festival.
Well,
Molly.
And I think last year, thinking about the positive, I think last year, and if not the last 2 years, I've mentioned how exciting a drone show would be. I'm seeing them more and more in other communities. And I'm just hoping that the more that they're out there, the more people are getting involved and the cost goes down, and that we can do that. Because I think a drone show out there would be really, really a lot of fun to do. So hopefully we can do that. And maybe there's someone in the community that has an in to be able to bring something like that. Even a small show just to kind of get us started would be great. So I'd look forward to talking about that as an alternative for sure. That'd be great.
Thank you.
We look forward to these other activities as well.
Well, before we got into all this heavy talk, I was just checking to see if, like with the dogs on the paddle boards, does everybody get a prize?
Oh, I'm not sure.
That all the dogs do.
Do
I'm
all
not
the
sure
dogs
that it's a
get prizes?
participation
dog treats.
kind of thing. I think it might
Okay.
be an actual
joy
They
race.
have to actually
participating.
win?
I think so.
Okay.
But I'm sure you can be a really good competitor.
Okay, I'm just
I've
asking
seen
for
you
a
out there.
friend. I'm just asking for a friend.
So if somebody has questions, or are you still taking any kind of suggestions? Probably not. Or
I'm open to anything.
There's a committee sometimes,
Not sometimes.
sorry, I was trying not to commit you. I think there is a committee, right?
There's a committee. We're
Yeah.
meeting next Wednesday. Anyone is welcome to come to our committee meeting.
Where-
8:00 8:00 here.
I remember
There-
the first time I think I complained about the Windjammer, some aspect of it, and somebody was like, well, you can be on the committee. And I was like, oh my. And I went to a meeting or two, and
Yeah, the
Um,
committee has dwindled, so we are
Oh.
definitely open for some new people to join that committee, toboggans too, but we'll talk about that later.
Oh, great.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have a suggestion?
Are there, the T-shirt design, has that been decided already?
That's been decided already. They've been ordered.
Okay.
There's a website, CamdenParksandRec.com has a webpage for Windjammer Festival. So everything that you might need to know about the festival is there, and it'll be updated as we kind of get a little bit closer.
You've done a great job on the website since
Crazy.
you've been in charge of Holly. Just
Thank you.
also want to mention that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Holly, I'm going to say off subject, super glad that you're staying with the town staff and moving into another important role.
Yes.
Thank you. It's a little bit daunting. It's all kind of new. It's kind of
You got this.
we're going to kind of figure it out, but I'm hoping that it's a great addition to the community and that I can help just sort of kind of foster all sorts of, information and be a repository for ideas and getting information out and just sort of, addressing some of the needs that we have. I know that the town staff is just, it's kind of, I think about it as similar to winter at the Snow Bowl, where I can have a list of things and I'm like, I'm just want to get this one thing done today. And I cannot get it done because 17 people come in every single day and need their thing done right away. And so I can never get one thing finished. And it's really, really tough. So I know that that is a lot of what they experience, but year round. And so I think that, maybe I can help sort of ease some of that to allow people to do other things that they need to get done. So hopeful.
And can I just say about Holly, if everybody
person?
doesn't know, when did you start being a reporter? Like,
2000, on my birthday in 2000.
so if you go back, I love going back and reading old articles in the Camden Herald and other places. And so she has been reporting extensively on this community for,
17 years I was.
and then paying attention for other parts of it. So it's, and just the articles that she's written about the background for all of these different things that we continue to talk about often over and over again. It's a resource that we would never be able to find in somebody that we could just recruit from somewhere, because she has all of those years of knowledge of how we've gotten where we are. And it's pretty exciting in terms of opportunities to get more information out to people and doing it in a way that hopefully will be easier to digest, because you're a trained professional in that area. So it's really exciting.
Thank you. And I came directly out of reporting into working for the town at the Snow Bowl. So, I had reported about the town and the Snow Bowl for years, a decade. And so I was excited to come and work for the town because I just knew all of the people, and still know a lot of them. And so it's really comfortable. And so this is, in a way, it's another comfortable move, because being able to call on people that, I know, or that I know things is going to be really helpful, I think. So, thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Any further comments or questions or anybody from the public that would like to speak about or ask questions about the Windjammer Festival? Schedule. Ken, anything? No? Okay. Want to make sure that you're,
Looking forward to it.
okay, good. So we need a motion to approve, and if you could add the start, whoever makes the motion, if you could add the 9 a.m. on Thursday to 9 a.m. on Monday, I think, on Sunday, thank you, that would be appropriate for this motion.
I would move that we approve the Windjammer Festival and associated closure of the road, of the public landing.
Public landing itself. Yep.
Starting Thursday at 9 a.m. and ending Sunday at 9 a.m.
Correct.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. Thanks, Holly. Moving into item 7 tonight, which are discussion items. 7A is a tax increment financing district presentation. Audra?
All right. So Renee, I've got it on this screen. So just as a little background, one of the questions that I'm going to ask the select board to put before voters in November has to do with the use of TIF proceeds. So I thought before we launch right into that, it would be good to give everybody a background on what TIF districts are, because
I appreciate that.
and you're absolutely not the only one. This comes up every single year with the budget committee. It's just an area of sort of municipal economic development and planning that isn't necessarily well known to everyone, and it's one of those sort of acronyms that we throw around that it needs a little bit more explanation. So I'm gonna explain our TIF district, or what a TIF is and what our TIF districts are, and the goal of them, and go through some projects that we've done over the years to implement our development program. So TIF is an acronym for tax increment financing. So this is a financing tool that municipalities can use to fund projects within the TIF district. So a TIF district is a really defined geographic area, and I'll show you the map on a couple slides over of where our TIF districts are. So once you determine what the geographic area is that you want included in the TIF district, what you do is you create a plan for how any new taxes that are generated from the district are going to be spent, and any new value. So it kind of freezes the value at that point in time, and any new taxable value that's generated in that district can be used specifically on the projects that have been identified in the development plan. So it's very flexible. So it could be 100% of the new value that's generated. It could be a portion of the new value. And it can only be used on those projects or initiatives that are in your development plan. And the reason why municipalities create TIF districts is because it's a method of funding projects or economic development initiatives directly in the areas that are generating that revenue for the town. So often municipalities will have TIF districts in their downtowns or across like industrial parks or areas where you have properties that are, or you have areas that are generating significant revenue for the town in terms of property taxes and create jobs. So it could be used as an incentive for businesses to create more jobs. So it could be, and this isn't something Camden has done, but other municipalities do it, where they'll do a rebate program for, say, a business who wants to come into town and say, we're going to come into Camden and we'll create 50 high-paying jobs. And as part of that deal to incentivize it, the town will say, okay, well, over the next 10 years or however long, we'll rebate you on 50% of your taxes. So that's how it's used in some places. Other places, it's you have a downtown where you have a lot of business activity, and that there are a lot of infrastructure projects that are going to benefit the businesses and keep them operating. And so you want to make sure that any new value that's generated in the downtown goes directly back into infrastructure improvements in the downtown. And that's really what the goal of the Camden TIF districts have been. So this is a map of our 2 TIF districts. So the blue is the downtown TIF, and then the orange is the highway TIF. And they're really two that kind of feed into each other. So the development program is connected. And I won't go into too much detail about that because it's overly confusing, but all you need to know is that they both have, kind of similar development plans, and that they identify infrastructure in those districts that the TIF proceeds have to be used on. So with our development program, it was certified in 2010. So when that TIF was originally created, the value of the district was about 100 million or 103 million to round up. And so it generated about 1.3 million in taxes that went into the general fund in 2010. So the value of that district has grown quite considerably since then. So it's 234 million at this point in time. And this is new numbers based on the reval. So that's 131 million in new taxable value. So it's anticipated to generate about 1.1 million in proceeds for FY25. And just to give you, some example of how that differs from past years, I believe when I first got here, it was generating about it was under $100,000 in revenue. So that was back in 2017. So the value of the TIF districts have grown quite significantly over the past few years. So some of the other benefits to, and I should have gone into this last slide, but one of the major reasons why municipalities create TIF districts is it also shelters this value. So the value that the TIF district is creating gets sheltered from our overall state assessed value and our county assessed value. And that means that if you have economic development in your community, you're not being sort of harmed by it in that you get reduced state subsidies or you're paying more in county tax as a result of the success of the TIF district, if that makes any sense to you, or the success of that area. All right, so I'm going to go through Camden's development program, and then I'm going to go through sort of examples of projects that have been completed with TIF proceeds. So the development program, this was approved by Camden voters in 2010, and the consultant who worked with the town on developing this plan is actually the executive director of the Midcoast Council of Governments. So anytime I have a question about the process they went through or, you know, anything that happened around that time period, he's been a great resource to help me. So it was quite extensive community engagement, and this was ultimately all voter approved. And this was ranked in order of priority when they completed it. So the number one priority at the time was expanding and improving the harbor boardwalk from the public landing area into constructing a footbridge that would connect to Harbor Park, and that hasn't been completed. Also, the construction of a river walk along the Muguntucook River, so running between the tannery site and the downtown. There are certain portions of that that have been completed, but for the most part, that project has not been completed. The lowering of the Montgomery Dam to address the flooding for the surrounding buildings. And so it was lowering the sluiceway there. That hasn't been completed. And they also talked about coordinating that with the replacement of the Route 1 bridge. So that's a project that MDOT's currently planning. So that project has not been completed. Sidewalk expansions around Main Street and displaced parking being moved to close by locations and other alternatives. So that has been completed. So part of that was through the project that we did with MDOT, where we did a lot of, we redid the sidewalks all through the downtown area. And so it was an 80-20 project that MDOT funded and the town funded with TIF proceeds as the match to that. And another part of all this was purchasing the Knox Mill parking lot. So that was the solution to any parking that was lost as a result of that project, finding sort of a nearby location to provide parking. Opera House exterior improvements. So that was completed. They talked about the roof. They talked about facade improvements.
Did I see accessibility there?
Accessibility was one. So that is one portion of that has not been completed.
But is eligible to use TIF funds?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, it is. Same thing in Opera House. So it talked a lot about expanding its ability to serve as a performance center, but it did talk about internal improvements. So, all the same sort of accessibility issues that we've talked about, that's something that is fundable under the development program. At the time, there was a lot of momentum behind helping develop a movie theater at the former movie theater on Mechanic Street, which is where the Antiques Marketplace is now. So I think at the time, it looked like there was going to be like a nonprofit forming, and the structure would be still owned privately. And there was support from the building owner at the time for them to continue owning the building, and the nonprofit helping with the redevelopment of that space. That project has since sort of lost momentum and interest, so that it didn't happen. Infrastructure improvements, so a lot of storm drainage work in conjunction with sewer work. That was part of the project that we did with MDOT when they upgraded the sidewalks. They also did stormwater upgrades. So again, we used TIF proceeds to match that. However, that was just sort of one portion of the overall stormwater projects that they identified that needed to be worked on in the downtown TIF district. Costs associated with the study of inflow and infiltration issues with the wastewater system. So that is something that we have not completed yet. We've done small little pieces of it, but it's certainly not as extensive as it needs to be. And that's one of the projects that we're going to be talking about the use of the upcoming TIF proceeds for. Infrastructure improvements to sidewalks. So in addition to the work that we've currently completed, there were a lot of other sidewalks on Mechanic Street, Bayview Street, Washington Street that we've done since then, but there are also other little sidewalks and work on Bayview Street that has yet to be done. A lot of infrastructure improvements to the different parking lots in town. So lighting improvements, resurfacing improvements. The downtown lighting and upgrading that was a identified project, and we did complete that several years ago. So I think it was about 7 years ago that project took place. So this development program did not approve any improvements outside of the TIF district. There were community-wide municipal investments. So at the time, they talked about using TIF proceeds to fund a municipal economic development director position. And they also talked about different townwide sort of economic development initiatives like marketing of the Snow Bowl and the Opera House. So those are things that we have used TIF proceeds on, and we currently have voter approval for the Opera House support and marketing, and that was approved in the FY25 and FY24 budgets. And another one that had momentum at the time, but sort of has fallen out of favor, and these programs in general have kind of fallen out of favor since the early 2000s, was a town revolving loan program to provide gap financing to support businesses. And really the reason why that's kind of fallen out of favor is there are a lot of these sorts of programs. Midcoast Council of Governments that I was talking about earlier, they have gap financing available for businesses, and it's a much larger program and much more options to what they have than what we could offer as an individual municipality. So it's better seated with them. So those are all the types of projects that we can use TIF proceeds on. So to give you an example of what we've used them on, so this is a picture showing some of the sidewalk expansions, and my apologies, these aren't necessarily sort of the best images illustrating that, and I think I actually reversed them. So to the image on the left, the two images on the left-hand side, the top is the new sidewalks, and this follows sort of the Main Street master plan with like the bump outs and the wider sidewalks, and below is what it looked like prior to that. So those are kind of examples of that.
That was actually supposed to be much more extensive.
Much more extensive, and this kind of like gives you a little sketch of what that is.
Was supposed to be.
So yeah, it was the, so we matched that project with DOT, but we've also done segments of the segment of Washington Street from Elm to Mechanic. So that was recognized in the development program. And we did the segment from Chestnut to Union Street. So it was pretty specific about like replacing that sidewalk. So it had granite curbing and concrete. Union Street from Elm Street to Pleasant. So we purchased all the sort of highlighted oranged areas. So it's 128 parking spots total, and it's about a quarter mile from the downtown five-way intersection. So that was a significant expansion of public parking within the downtown area. So the redevelopment of the Harbor Walkway was another project that we used TIF proceeds to complete. And so that's during construction.
Oh, is that Meg Barclay's design of that before the graphic there?
Yes, yeah, that was the design. So the downtown streetlight replacements, so they were replaced with LEDs. that can be controlled remotely. And the exterior improvements to the Opera House. So we did a lot of masonry work, and also the roof was a project that was identified in the TIF program. We did not use TIF proceeds to fund that because it was very expensive and surpassed what we'd be able to fund in any one financial year. But it's in the development program and it's complete now. Also using TIF proceeds for marketing and operational support for the Opera House is something that we've been doing, which offsets the cost of that to taxpayers in the general fund. So if you look at what's left and what the priorities are, number 8 on the list, the infrastructure improvements, so stormwater and wastewater upgrades, and the inflow and infiltration study. So this is sort of an example of the issue that we're dealing with on Bayview Street during rain events. It happens quite frequently. So this is something that we still need to do more investigation work into, and then figure out what's sort of the best option to address these issues, whether it be replacement of the infrastructure or lining. So this kind of brings us into the FY25 TIF proceeds. So since this was a reval year going into the development of the FY25 budget, we weren't quite sure exactly, how much we would have available until the reval was complete. So I was pretty conservative in the amount of TIF funds that I budgeted to use. And I focused those on the operational support for the Opera House and a little bit of funding for stormwater work within the downtown area. So those two things were approved by voters as part of the FY25 budget approval. So what I'm going to be asking is, because we're confident that the TIF district is going to generate an additional $700,000 in revenue, to use that on the wastewater and I&I investigation work. And that's something that I would be asking you to put on the November ballot for voter approval. So keep in mind that this is, one single financial year, the TIF is going to be generating about $1.1 million. So that's what we're looking for on a yearly basis moving forward.
So by doing that, you're saying you'd replace the $700,000 would come from the TIF as compared with the, $16 million approved for sewer type and other infrastructure projects. That it sounds like the same sort of project, but different bucket of money.
Yes, yep. And just giving us the ability to do more of that work that we know, it's vastly more work than the 12.5 million that's been bonded. So so it allows us to focus on the issues within the TIF district and address them in addition to, the areas in other parts of town that can be covered by the bond.
So the bond issue, again, won't cover this. The TIF will cover this portion. I mean, even if it's not the whole bill, but
It will, yes, it's going to offset the
Some of
need
it.
to spend just bond money on these areas.
Okay.
Are you ready for questions, Audra? Or do you have more?
Yes, yep.
I have a question about how the TIF funds are collected. So this is the downtown, when the downtown areas pay their property tax bill, all of their property tax goes into TIF, or just a portion of their property tax goes into the TIF fund?
So just a portion. So just the revenue that's been generated
Since what date? Can you
since
remember?
2010,
Since 2010, the increased value.
increased value.
And
yes.
that's the way it will stay forever? Or until the
No, so
okay.
they only last, our TIF is a 20-year TIF. And this is another part of it too. Like, I think it's good to have this conversation now in preparation for, things that we need to start thinking about. So this TIF will expire in 2030. It could be extended to 2040, which I would highly recommend that we do. And also, I believe that the development program should be updated, because I think that there are new needs and there are some obsolete projects in the development program. So I think that, extending it to 2040 and looking at amending the development program are things that we're going to want to do in the next couple of years. It'll be a priority within the next couple of years.
Okay. Allison, and then Ken.
Don't go for it, Ken.
Ken
I want to
first.
follow up on Tom's question. So the TIF funds are generated from property tax, so whether or not there was a TIF district in existence, the property tax that we take in it would be the same. It would not change. Okay, so
Yes.
it's a way of earmarking those funds.
Yes.
Okay.
And keeping them local too. Keeping those funds local as well. So it earmarks it for special projects, but right, am I correct?
Yes.
Like that money doesn't have to get distributed to the state or to the county too. So it is a significant
Right, so
benefit to Camden.
the sheltering it from the state and from the county is the big benefit to what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You're sheltering it from the school?
Yes.
Okay. That's just, I think it's really great that you gave this presentation. I don't think seen this presentation just like that since being on the select board. And it took me several years to realize why a few people were upset with me for not giving more, caring more about the downtown master plan and things like that. And I remember I first got on the select board and Deb Dodge and a few others who had been chair of the planning board, super involved in all of this stuff. Deb Dodge came to me and she said, this is the downtown master plan and this is your Bible. And at the time I was like, this is just like fussy stuff about sidewalks and this isn't what I care about. And it took me several years before I actually kind of read the whole thing front to back and realized, wow, there was so much that went on there and so much good quality planning. And it's really important to find a way for there to be continuity between boards because it took me a while to realize how valuable that was. And it was nice to see this list like that. So I guess that's really my only comment.
Thank you. Anybody else? Chris?
Yeah, just run over me one more time as far as projects that may be obsolete now. When again do we have an opportunity to draft either new projects or get rid of old projects?
Whenever we're ready as a community to amend our TIF district, and when we have, an idea of what we want to update it to include, we can do that.
So would that ordinarily coincide with the comprehensive plan, right? The WRI.
It could. I'd say that, probably where we're at and everything, and this has been a really helpful exercise for me and department heads, because I was able to sort of go through this and look at what have we actually done? Like what on this list can we sort of check off that we've accomplished? And it's quite a bit when you look at it. I'd say it's the vast majority of it. So I'd say between the projects that we've accomplished, some of the obsolete projects, and then looking at all the new stuff that we know since 2010, we're really at and given that, 2030 is going to come sooner than we would all like, we're really in a place within the next 2 years where this is going to be a priority for us. And it's something that we can do at any time that we're ready. And I do think that we have a good idea of what a priority or what the priority should be in the downtown moving forward in the highway area, because, the highway TIF prior to COVID and the boom in the real estate market, that TIF really did not generate any revenue whatsoever. Things have changed now. We have a lot of work that needs to be done on Elm Street. So, I do think we've got opportunities to, relook at this and do it pretty quickly, because I do think we have a good understanding of what our priorities are at this point in time.
Have all the funds been expended each year, or is there a reserve?
So there have been some funds carried over from year to year. Recently, we've spent, everything that's sort of come before. And a lot of that was when we purchased outright the Knox Mill parking lots. So that was last year that we did that. And so that kind of spent the balance of what we had.
Allison?
If we how does it work for the accumulated revenues that haven't been spent by 2030? If we did nothing, would those funds stay available for this
Yes.
sort of sequestered use, or
Yes, you could still use them on implementing the projects in the development plan.
wouldn't be adding to it?
Right. Yeah.
But so to Chris's question, it would make sense to make those changes, reconfigure what our goals are sometime before 2030, before it expires. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And also, like not just redetermining your goals, you can extend your TIF district for another 10 years. So extending it and then reworking the development program.
So this is all, what are we, or this is just a discussion item tonight? Is that's good? Okay.
Discuss it.
Yeah.
Does anybody from the public have any comments or questions on the TIF? Thank you. Board, anything else?
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, Audra, thank you. Educational. Appreciate it.
Oh, and another, just one more point about all this. It is stated in the development program that any amendments or changes to the development program need to be made by a Community and Economic Development Advisory Committee. So that would be another thing that we would have to look at sort of standing up to move forward with, expanding the life of the district and making changes to the development program.
We need a new CDAC to amend.
Yes.
And
Another,
then voters? Oh, sorry.
Yes, then it goes to vote. Well,
So just-
CDAC, select board voters.
Oh, so not just, I was like, wow, just
Yeah.
CDAC, huh? Okay.
Not just CDAC.
it's another reason to start thinking about this early, though. It's one
Yes.
more step in the regulatory process. Yeah.
And speaking of the comprehensive plan, that is coming up.
Yes.
We should think about allocating some funds for the community engagement process that should happen as a result of that, or in anticipation of it. Lincolnville's doing this Heart and Soul program right now, which it would be nice to, can we use TIF funds for that kind of thing?
For comp planning,
Yeah.
you absolutely you can. So it talks about, community-wide economic development initiatives. And, there's a real argument to make that like your comp plan, a big portion of that is community-wide economic development and how you want to plan for that. And infrastructure investments and land use.
Some of the same. It's
Yes, yeah.
certainly a lot of overlap. there.
Crossover, I
Yeah.
agree.
I hadn't realized that it had allocated possible funding for the community and economic development position, which is really Jeremy's position, the initial, we reconfig, we used to have that, right? And then we reimagined that
Yeah.
into a,
Even when Brian Hodges was the last town employee who was specifically economic development director. And I don't believe that when Brian was in that position, the TIF district didn't generate nearly enough revenue to pay for any portion of what he did. So, we just got accustomed to funding all of that through the general fund.
when are tax bills coming out?
So I believe that they're hoping to commit taxes within the next 2 weeks, and then it's usually a week after commitment that the bills go out. So it would be end of August, early September.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Item 7B tonight is our November ballot articles. This is a preview of them and, a discussion item for each one, because we're going to be working on these over the next 2 select board meetings. Transferring TIF and ARPA funds to wastewater special revenue fund. Audra, can you give us a thought process on that?
Yes, so we just talked about the TIF, so that would be $700,000 in TIF proceeds that we request to transfer over to the wastewater budget, or we call it the wastewater special revenue fund. And then the ARPA funds, that's the American Rescue Plan Act. So some of you will remember at one point we allocated all of those funds to be spent on the John Street project. we had voter approval to reallocate about 165,000 of that to the Pearl Street project. So the balance of that, so we received about $500,000 in total. So the balance of those funds, instead of spending specifically on the John Street project, I'd like to get authorization from voters to also transfer that into the wastewater budget, the wastewater special revenue fund, because it's highly unlikely that we're going to be able to complete the John Street project by the deadline for when those funds have to be spent, which is 2026. So if we transfer those funds into the wastewater special revenue fund, it gives us the flexibility to use them on wastewater projects and then planning for the bond and a lot of those sort of major upcoming projects that we need to do and expenses and getting prepared for it.
How does that affect the budget that was approved before? Does that then reduce the budget that was recently approved by going ahead and using those funds? Does it supplant something else?
No.
Does it make the budget larger?
It just gives us more money to spend on capital projects that we don't have to raise through rates.
And when would that rate impact be felt? Not on this tax year, but on the following, correct?
Yes, it would mean we're sort of offsetting projects that we'd normally have to fund through, rates or through bonding and, eventually paying the debt service on bonds through this grant.
Sure. Allison?
Yeah, I think that this is important because it's what's going to happen with the wastewater rates is we're on a trajectory to continue to increase those because of the funding for paying the bond for all of the improvements. And then the bond that we just approved can be a combination of wastewater ratepayers and the town general fund for the public works portion. But we haven't had to face the reality of any of that yet because it was just approved. And so it hasn't hit the budgets. And so we don't have more funds in the wastewater side of things, then we have very little flexibility in terms of we're either going to have to raise rates a lot. And I think we can continue to raise rates right now as a wastewater customer. That's going to be reasonable, but it's going to hit a point where it's going to start to feel uncomfortable if we don't allocate other funding sources. So I think all of this is a smart thing to do, and there's going to have to be some flexibility. But if we don't do it, we're setting ourselves up for probably uncomfortable conversations the next time we approve a wastewater budget and realize that we have to increase rates, I think.
Is that accurate that the $12.5 million bond will be paid for partially by wastewater rates, or it will be?
It's our decision.
Yeah, it'll ultimately be the decision of the select board.
Okay.
If you kind of look at recent projects we've done, namely Pearl Street, where it's been like the total reconstruction of all of the subsurface infrastructure, as well as, the resurfacing and pedestrian improvements and all, from the bottom to the top. About 4/5 of the cost of that is the sewer infrastructure work, and about 1/5 is everything else. So I guess, if you want to follow a model where, the ratepayers pay for those improvements, that means that, when we're paying the debt service on the bond, it could end up being like a significant portion gets borne by the ratepayers. However, that's your choice. You have the flexibility by charter to determine what proportion is going to be funded through user rates versus property taxes.
We've historically, it was all the infrastructure improvements were funded by taxpayers, and all of the operational costs were funded by user fees as part of the whole system when they set this up. And then we've moved more recently, as part of the conditions of the loan, to funding the past few years. All of the wastewater operations have been funded by ratepayers. And so that's been a savings for taxpayers and is sort of more equitable in some ways, like how we try to do trash. But it's going to get to a point where it'll be it could be too much, or we might say, you know what, we really need to, like we've done in the past, to say, this is really not just a wastewater users situation. This is something that benefits the whole town. This is why Rockport has very high rates, because they've never done that. They've always used 100% ratepayers. But historically, Camden residents have felt like, even if I'm not on the sewer myself, it's a community responsibility, and there's been support for taxpayer funding for that. So the ARPA funds, at first when I saw this, the ARPA funds injecting into that really is a departure from our idea of we're going to have wastewater ratepayers pay for this, because ARPA funds, that's a different source of funding. So I was a little bit opposed to it at first, because I like the idea of keeping things away from taxes as much as possible, but it'll be unmanageable at some point if it's 100% ratepayers. And the rest of the community does benefit by not having things overflow in the harbor, no matter where the source of it all is.
Any other comments or questions on ARPA funds to wastewater special revenue? Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is charter amendments. Budget committee to a service review committee.
So we've talked quite a bit about potentially changing how the budget committee functions. And this is over, multiple years of trying different things with the budget committee and trying to come up with a process that I think that's more satisfying to everyone. And I think that, in the past few years, like I've talked about in the memo, it's the budget process has become an incredibly sort of time-consuming process for the town, where we're looking at about a third of our year is consumed with budget preparation and review. And we don't seem to get, the more time we spend on it, we don't seem to end up with a more satisfying result. And also, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find and recruit budget committee members. And I think a lot of it is a perception issue that you need to have some sort of like expertise in budgeting or finance to be able to meaningfully participate. And I really don't think that that's the intent of the budget committee. And I think that, there are ways that we could sort of expand the process where we get more input from a more diverse group of citizens if we talked about it differently, so that it isn't, just sort of the line item review of the budget, and the focus is more on, sort of value for money in municipal services, and people being able to talk about municipal services and what's working and what isn't, what they would like to see. Just those kind of conversations, I think it would make for a much better process where you got different voices to participate. So, this is just sort of a first stab at looking at what could we do that would be a little bit different, but we'd still get that level of citizen participation and input into municipal services and what we're doing, and, how we spend money and what we focus on. So I went through and thought about, if we did shift from having, a budget committee where their focus was that very procedural, review and recommendation of every sort of expenditure in the budget that then goes to the select board, who more or less does the same thing, that goes to voters who approve it. What could that change look like? So after speaking with a few department heads and speaking with a few other communities that do things a little bit differently, we could call it anything you want, but the best thing I could think of was like a service review committee who gives us sort of input before we even start the budget process. So before department heads or I even go through and put pen to paper and think about, what the budget is going to look like for the upcoming year, having a group of citizens that we can talk to, and they can give us ideas and we can vet ideas with them. And they give us, input that we can use to construct the budget before we then go to the select board for the review. And then it finally goes to the voters for approval. So that's kind of what I looked at, and went through the charter and sort of looked like if we were going to do that, what are the types of amendments that we would need to make. And so that's what's included in the packet.
Susan?
So as I read through this, it's just unclear to me how this will really differ. So will the committee, the Service Review Committee, be presented with the individual department budgets for their consideration and have the opportunity to review them with the department heads as we have done in the past? Or will that piece be, where will the information come from to make those recommendations to the select board?
So I was thinking even prior to putting together a budget, we'd get this committee together and, talk about different services that they'd like to see in the upcoming budget, and department heads and myself, even members of the select board or committees that had ideas on what they want to do for upcoming years, would be able to sort of go through and talk about all of that and vet some of those ideas prior to putting the budget together. Because I think that that's also a difficulty, is that, by the time we've gone through the work of writing the budget, even budget committee members of the committee chairs, they don't feel like there's necessarily a good place for them in that process to have input into things, or it's just not very clear. So I thought that, getting the committee together prior to even like writing the budget would give a better opportunity for community members to have input into it.
I'm just a little skeptical as to whether that would result in realistic additions or deletions from the budget. People from the general public. I mean, we've all got wish lists of things that we would like to see happen. I would not want to see the process extended needlessly because we come up with sort of a wish list and no way to actually bring it to fruition.
Yeah.
Whereas I respect the department heads for saying, this is what we do and this is how much money we need to do it. And I do appreciate the possibility of having a more, a more dynamic process. I just wonder about kind of putting the cart before the horse with coming up with things that might not be viable at all.
Yeah, and I do think one of the things that we've done with the budget committee in the past few years, it's been a lot of education about what the departments do. And I think that we'd have to continue that into, if we had a committee that functioned more like this, that sort of education about the departments and what they're currently doing and what their priorities are. And, we're still going to need to do all of that for this to be effective.
Allison?
I mean, I think this is potentially one step in the right direction. Calling it something different, I think would help. As I'm fond of saying, it used to be called the Committee of 21, and it was just a committee to provide recommendations to the electorate on everything that was on the warrant. And it was back before there was any kind of technology available, and it was the major form of public engagement aside from the select board. And I think we don't have a very strong agreement among everybody on what the purpose of the budget committee is. And so I did a lot of reading today about, and other times about, the best practices everywhere. And
Allison, just a moment. Ladies, excuse me, ladies in the front.
Beatty,
If you'd like to have a private conversation, if you could step outside, please. Thank you. Allison, go ahead.
so in reading about how this is being done in other places and what the best practices are, what I kept seeing is that you have to start by defining a purpose. And is the purpose more like a financial oversight committee? Is the purpose to get citizen input on the budget? I think in a lot of ways for us, the purpose has been to recruit future elected officials and people that are going to be involved in town government. So we really, it's kind of a much broader discussion, I think, that we have to have. But we definitely, it's not just a budget committee. And so often I do hear people say that they don't want to do this committee because they're not good at budgeting. And really, the committee for us has been a citizen input kind of checks and balances on the select board type of thing. And if the goal is to get broad citizen input, I don't think the budget committee is accomplishing that, because most people don't want to be on the budget committee. And so I would really like to see us move toward that committee being, if it's a committee at all, being something that is helping to get this out into the community. Maybe it's helping to develop surveys that everybody can take ahead of the budget process, even just a committee that's going out and asking the public, how do you want to be involved in the budgeting process? How do you want to give input? So I would like to, I think this change would be a step in the right direction, but that it needs a bigger look, and us defining what the goals should be.
Ken?
Yes, thanks. I want to follow up on a couple of things that Allison said. Starting with a purpose and starting a little earlier in the season sounds like a great goal. My impression of what happens in the budget committee is that every idea that gets presented to the budget committee is a great idea, and they approve them all. And it seems to me that they need to start earlier with a purpose, and that purpose would be something along the lines of, let's make sure that perhaps a 3% rise this year should be our goal, and that gives them something to measure against, so that they take the overall effect of what they're doing into account. And it means some hard decisions. It's not approving every good idea, but making some hard decisions at every step along the way. So I agree that meeting earlier and setting a goal would be very effective. The other point that you mentioned, Allison, was checks and balances. The budget committee is the traditional institutional watchdog on this body, and I would hate to see that institution go away. It sounds as if the budget committee is going to be abolished in favor of a service review committee, and I think the traditional assignment or the responsibility for the budget committee is really a core to what town government is all about, and we should not bypass or water down the goal of the budget committee. One way to make budget committee members feel like their work is worthwhile is to honor their work and make sure that their recommendations are firmly, if not carried through, at least well considered. For any volunteer, if their work does not achieve anything, then you lose your volunteers. So we need to really honor the budget committee.
Thanks, Ken. Chris?
Yeah, I agree that the losing the budget committee would certainly feel like losing a degree of governance that anyone in the community could be part of as a member of the budget committee. And it sounds like with this, there is talk about, so it's actually going to start earlier. And if it starts earlier, it doesn't seem like it makes the process shorter. It makes it longer. The budget committee, although there is certainly the education factor that should go on as far as what the people need, but what the department does, but really the function should be to determine what the budget is for that, and maybe a little less on the, educate on what happens. I know, confining the, department heads to speak specifically about the budgets might, and have shorter, timeframes just to speak about the budget items. And as Ken said, start with a target of, we don't want to increase the budget beyond X amount overall. Losing the budget committee, it does feel like, again, losing a governance piece that should be there. If we wanted to do a service committee, as Audra said, the service committee would happen before the budget season. So why not have that committee in its own existence. If they want to have a service review committee that happens before the budget committee season, so be it. But I don't think we should be replacing people's opportunity to express directly with the department heads on the individual budget line items. I think that's still, is it fun? To some, maybe, but most no, but sometimes you have to do it even if it's not fun. And you don't want to lose something because it's not fun to do anymore. You want to make sure that people still have the voice and that governance to say, hey, no, I know last year we approved 16% or whatever it was, and we really don't want that to happen going forward. We got to give people the opportunity to understand the impacts of that through the budget committee and serving on that, and make their work feel impactful, to have it be impactful. Skipping that step, I don't think is a good thing.
Thanks, Chris.
That's what I think.
Yeah. I'm actually in favor of this change. I know that the department heads make their budgets primarily based on last year's budget. And starting the process earlier inevitably makes next year's budget less accurate. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for our department heads is the earlier we start, the more indefinite the next budget becomes. It is nice to have historical data. So from that aspect of it, I see this as an improvement. If we really kind of limit more of the budget process to the select board. The select board, because of our day-to-day, week-to-week involvement, we are inevitably probably the most informed of the citizenry that doesn't work for the, directly for the town about the budget. Just again, because of the nature of this service that we do. I like the idea of the service review committee because I think that's the best impact that we could actually receive from citizens is a broader idea of what it is they want from municipal services as we make these decisions. Because in the end, it is the select board that sends a budget to voters. And I've seen over the course of a couple of years of doing this that I think what happens in the end is the select board sends the budget to voters that they want to send with some input from the budget committee, but it's really the select board's budget that goes to voters. We listen to what the budget committee has to say, but I think it's more in a broader sense rather than the dollars and cents of what they're telling us to send to voters. It's more about what we receive from them on information as far as the services go. And I think this is a more accurate way of depicting that relationship. And it simplifies it a little bit. But Allison?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that I don't think we have on this table an agreement of the purpose of the budget, of not just like the annual purpose of the budget committee, but the purpose, the benefit that is derived to the town from the budget committee and what that's accomplishing. And the budget is our most important municipal document. It is the master plan. Everything that the town does ideally is reflected in the budget. And so there is no separating budget oversight from service oversight. And when you do that and you tell everybody on these different committees that they work on their thing, and then there's a whole different committee that works on the budget, and then at the end the select board tries to slap it all together, it's not working well because all of those things are intertwined, and people inevitably on every single committee end up not feeling like they've had the opportunity to give the input. Then it finally comes to the select board when we put out this whole public hearing thing where we say, that is your opportunity for the general public, after all the input from committees or the budget committee or whatever, to come and say, this is what I might want to say. We're like, well, we've got like one meeting and maybe two for the select board to deliberate. It reduces the quality and accountability of our work. So I think that you just can't separate the budget from services. And if we try to compartmentalize that, it just leads to more frustration. If there's a need for a watchdog group for the select board, I would argue that the citizens are the watchdog group for the select board. and that it's easier for the citizens to be a watchdog when they know what dog they're supposed to be watching. But when you have it, when I'm telling people, well, you could go to this committee, you could go to that, it's sort of like I'm taking the accountability all away. And then I end up saying, well, we're doing this because of the budget committee. And people are like, oh, well, I missed that. So I think we need to make it easier for the general public to participate and give input, and that being able to continuously send the message, contact the select board. As much as it's annoying sometimes for us to hear it, it's important that they know where to go. So I think that works better for the general public, and that should be our main concern.
Does anybody from the public want to comment on this? Select board, anything else?
I can't believe that nobody wants to.
Sure, good discussion. I think that we're gonna, we'll see about that moving forward. Next issue tonight, or next agenda item tonight, is the Code of Ordinances amendment, which is a herbicide pesticide applicator ingredient notification. Jeremy, I can see you have a background for us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I drafted a memo and I drafted a very straightforward code. You guys talked on July 3rd about a pesticide code for the town. And then I think her name is Joanne. I think I have that correct, right?
Joanne Wilson.
Right. She was in and talked at great length about what other communities have done and about public education. It was a great conversation, I thought. And then Tom, I think you were the one that primarily advocated to try to do something this fall on a notification. Is what I took was it was a notification code on when someone's applying herbicides on their property. So what I drafted, and I had the State Board of Pesticide Control Executive Director Alexander Peacock review it. I spoke with him at great length about it. He gave me some good ideas, and I talked with Bill Kelly about it. The process to adopt, as Joanne mentioned, one of the towns in southern Maine ran into an issue because they didn't do correct notifications to the state. So what we would have to do is we would have to 7 days prior to the town vote in November, send a copy of what's going to voters to the state. They have it. They don't review it. They just have it. And then once it's adopted, if it gets approved by voters, within 30 days, we have to send them an attested copy of what voters approved. And then it becomes law for the town. So what I've drafted is simply a notification and reporting code. It's a new chapter because we don't have one on pesticides. So it'd be chapter 194 is what I figured out the number would be. And it would only apply to licensed applicators. So these are, used to be, I think, ChemLawn. They changed their name to True Green. Interesting. Good name. And other entities, there are arborists that are licensed applicators. There are pest control businesses that are licensed applicators. And it would apply to the application of any herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, and even fertilizers, because some of those things are included in fertilizers. Any application of them in the town of Camden, anywhere, on any property. The licensed applicators would need to provide written notice to abutters and properties within 250 feet, as well as the town, 2 days prior to the application of the herbicide. They would have to provide the EPA registration number, as well as the trade name of the pesticide. And they would need to provide a location map on where it's being applied on the property. And they would need to provide, let us know what pest was being treated. And then annually, that licensed applicator would have to provide a report to the town by February 1st of all of the applications that they did in town, including the locations, the quantity, whether it's volume or pounds of herbicides or pesticides. They would need to provide that to the town. And that's what I drafted. I think it would be very, very, very hard and challenging to try to make it apply to everyone. Homeowners, unfortunately, people can go to Home Depot and buy Roundup and take it home. It would be very, very hard to regulate something like that. And the licensed applicators, In talking with the State Board of Pesticide Control Executive Director, they include copies of what's proposed or what's going to voters or what gets passed by voters in their agendas, in the Board of Pesticide Control agendas. And all the licensed applicators in the state are on the list, the mailing list. They would get a copy of what's going to the board. So then it would be posted on the state's website, Board of Pesticide Control website, with the other towns that have regulations. I do think this is a great way to start educating and raise awareness and actually get some good information. It'd be really, especially if you're looking at regulating them further, which seems appropriate to me. So that's what I've drafted. It's fairly straightforward. You can see it's 2 pages, very simple definitions. Pesticides are, again, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, fertilizers, all that stuff. I've shared this with a handful of folks around, and people have really thought it was a good thing and a good step. I do feel like Camden, I will say, just being planning and development director, I think we've taken some really great strides and taken some great steps in kind of being a leader in a lot of things. I think the peer regulations that went forward and voters approved overwhelmingly is a sign of that. This is another one. I think this would be approved overwhelmingly. I think it just sets a tone and what this town's about and what the town values. And I think a good start is getting information on what's actually being spread in town. And that's what this does. That was my hope.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
If you could stay up there, I think
Yeah.
there's going to be some questions. Allison?
Do we already have, is there already a requirement that pesticide application only be done by licensed applicators?
No, you as a homeowner can go buy anything.
Sure,
that's
but
on.
what requires somebody to become a licensed applicator? Putting it on anybody else's property?
Yeah, if you're doing a commercial business, I mean, if you're in the business of arborists are licensed applicators because they treat things.
I guess to put more quickly, what is the likelihood that everybody that is applying these chemicals to lawns or elsewhere in Camden commercially is a licensed
Correct.
applicator?
Correct.
You believe
Anyone that
that's
does it
already the
commercially
case?
is a licensed applicator by the state of Maine. You cannot apply any pesticide or herbicide or fungicide in the state of Maine commercially without being a licensed applicator.
So like all the arborists that do like the brown tail moth treatments. all that
Arborists
kind of
I've
stuff.
heard a bunch of times, but then you have 5 million companies that take care of lawns.
Yep.
in
And a lot
Camden.
of those smaller landscape contractors they have some of their employees have pesticide applicator licenses, and it would apply to them as well. So
I guess I would like this to explicitly state that in some way, because it almost feels to me like, well, as long as I don't become licensed, it's no big deal.
what's that?
It almost feels to me when I read this, like, well, as long as I don't become licensed, I know it would be, I don't know that it's widely known that if I, have a lawn care business, I can't apply pesticides to somebody's lawn
Oh,
to,
I think it's well known
I
in
didn't
the
know that.
business. And if you're a landscaper, you are well known. They know very well that they cannot apply any herbicide or pesticide without a license in the state of Maine. If they are, that's a serious.
I don't know that the
Serious
general
issue.
community knows that when they just hire somebody and they say, it's not everything is happening at the level of like big landscaping company. I'm sure Tom Jackson knows all the rules and but there's a lot that happens that's not like that. It's just, I've got this guy that takes care of my property or this woman that takes care of my property. And
I think that's more of a state issue than a town issue, though. How are you thinking that we address this on the?
in accordance with, I just think sometimes that language, maybe there's a definition for licensed applicator or there's a.
Could we reference the
I will
state
look for
ordinance?
good, I hear what you're saying, and I'll look see if there's a way I can
What
clarify
is the
that
rule that
definition.
says anybody applying pesticides on somebody else's property?
I think we should reference the state ordinance in our own ordinance, if that's the intent.
I can do that. I mean,
To be
the
clear
definition I used was for licensed applicators, any person licensed by the state of Maine and regulated by the Maine Board of Pesticide Control to apply pesticides as defined. So I can
That's-
clarify a little bit, but I think it's very
That's pretty
clear.
clear.
But it's not clear to me that people that aren't licensed aren't allowed to do it.
I hear you, and I will talk, I'll talk to Alex Peacock, who's been very open and very supportive, and he's with the Pesticide Control Board. I'll talk with him and see if there's what his thoughts are on it and way to handle that.
So if somebody pays me $20, I can't put Roundup on their property?
Absolutely not.
Not that I would, but that's, I
Right.
don't, I mean,
I
that's,
understand.
that's good to, that's, I don't think that's widely known.
Well, ignorance of the law has never been an excuse.
I know, but we might as well, if some of the purpose of this is to educate, we might as well try to educate.
True.
Because
It's a good
if
point.
I don't know this, then I'm willing to bet that there are some other people that don't either. I
Good
mean,
point.
So, Tom,
Ken?
I have a similar question. This puts the burden on licensed applicators, but the homeowners does not address the homeowners. In fact, it puts such a burden on the licensed applicators. I could see more homeowners taking it upon themselves. Is there?
Oh, that's a
There
good
must be a class of pesticides that are not available to homeowners. Is that the only protection that the town has from people going out and doing their own pesticide work?
that's a
I'd have
really
to do
good
it-
point. I can see somebody being like, hey, you put this on your lawn yourself instead.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that.
One of the things that we're trying to accomplish here is an initial step, and maybe it's a final step too, but this is a move in the right direction that I think that a lot of people can get behind, and it's also an educational move. I think this brings some of this, the idea that these pesticides, herbicides that people are putting on their lawns and they eventually wind up in our water, our
Or soil,
lake,
yeah.
our harbor, and then eventually our water supply, that this brings attention to it. And so even if it's not the perfect solution, it's a step in the right direction.
Well, and there's nothing in this language that's so onerous to somebody who's doing pesticide application. It's not requiring that they pay a fee or there's a punitive action here. It's just a notification that's required, as I'm reading it.
Correct.
And so that people know what's being applied next door and not have their pets or their children or, not be out there breathing it while it's happening. So to the extent that it's merely an opportunity to bring the awareness, as you're saying, I don't think I don't think you're setting up a situation where professionals are going to try to skirt this by saying, here, I'll give it to you, you apply it yourself, because there's nothing, all they're required to do is post notification that they're doing it.
And
Well,
send
yeah.
it to a butters. I think
What will be onerous for them, I will say, will be that 2-day written notice to the town and to the property owners. They're going to have to do some legwork to figure out when they're going to apply it, figure out who the property owners are within 250 feet. I mean, it is the reality. Another onerous thing, I think, is initially I did not have the placing of the placard on the property every 50 feet. That was actually recommended by Alex Peacock at the Board of Pesticide Control. When I had conversations with him about this, he was reviewing it critically and what we were trying to do. I mean, I can think of, properties out on Outer Bayview that have 1,000 feet of frontage, right, on Bayview potentially, or 500 feet of frontage on Bayview because their property is so large. And you generally have to just post it in a conspicuous place. I think state law says that. Well, what is that? What's that mean? And if I'm walking my dog and, I don't walk the entire length to see where that conspicuous place is, which is generally placed by the driveway, I've just walked my dog, and the dogs generally walk along the side of the road, and they're probably walking on the pesticide. So placing it every 50 feet, I think is a pretty significant thing. It may not be onerous, but they're going to have to do it.
And would you assist the applicators if they called up the town office and said, we want to apply it at such and such property? Can you help us find the abutters and the abutters address? You'd reference
what
the
we do,
tax
what we
document.
would tell them, and we would walk them through it. We do it currently all the time with people when they inquire about certain things. We have people ask us all kinds of questions, and we refer them to our GIS site, and we show them how to get there. And we on the phone, we're talking to them. We tell them how to get there. They bring it up while we're on the phone with them, and then you can use that tool. There's a tool, the measuring tool, and then you can find all the address and property owner information there. And that's how we would help them.
I like
don't
that.
think and that's not onerous. It's something we do all the time.
I think that the posting of the little cards or signs is kind of the most important part of this, I think, because then people that are right there, they see it anyway. And really, it's, most of these things are not confined to the, right there. They go in storm drains and all of that stuff. It was interesting how you mentioned the dogs walking along it and stuff. The town right of way, I mean, we probably don't want to get into this right now, but it would maybe be good to ask people not to do it in the town right of way. Or,
And I think that's a good point, and I think we can be clear about that. I think the issue is we'll have to find out. I mean, not all of the right-of-ways are town property,
Some of them
right?
are, yeah.
Some of them are just
yeah.
easements for the road over it, so the people still own the underlying land
Oh,
underneath
yeah,
the
we don't want to
road.
get into that debate.
I don't want to get into that. That's tough. But I think definitely posting every 50 feet. And I think the 2-day notice is important and appropriate. I mean, if someone's going to spray it and I'm close and I have concerns about it, I've got animals, kids are playing in the yard often,
Right.
at least I can get notice that 2 days ahead of time, I can plan that day, not to be around or not to have my kids outside that day or let my dogs run around that day. I mean, if you're smelling it, you're breathing it in. And they applied it across from my house in Belfast, and I smelled it, all day. It's horrible.
Sometimes even when you're not smelling it, you might
Right.
be breathing it in.
Yeah.
Does anybody from the public want
I
to?
mentioned streams and location close to resources. I mean, I don't want to forget that. I don't want people to forget that ditches are in essence streams. I mean, they're just conveying that stormwater runoff to a stream. So it's pretty significant. And that's why I want the map. I think the location map is important and part of this too, so we can actually see where people are applying it, how close to our resources, including streams or ditches.
I have just one quick thing.
Then you'll be next, please. Chris, go ahead.
I'll learn from here.
Go.
I want to thank you guys for what you do.
If you could introduce yourself, please, just
Oh,
for the
sorry,
YouTube.
Beatty Parker, up Washington Street. I monitored the Board of Pesticide Control for at least 15 years for MOFGA, and it's wonderful to hear you talking about applicators' work and versus the homeowners, which is another step. The fact that you're working on this is just heartwarming to me. I want to thank you for the fireworks discussion too. And it seems to me there are at least several other things that you are taking responsibility that needed to be taken a long time ago. And it's a start, like Jeremy says. You can't do it all at once. The homeowner thing's very important, but this is a foot in the door. I want to say a couple of things. The general public thinks of herbicide as a different thing from a pesticide. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. I made compost out of the landscapers' grass clippings, and they said, no pesticides in that. Well, they had herbicides in it. So there's a language problem, which the Board of Pesticide Control knows about, you may know about, but general public thinks herbicides is another kind of thing, and they can be very dangerous. The getting into water is, of course, important, and animals and children rolling on, particularly lawns, but there's something that happens at night in the air in the summer, which is drift. So if your windows are open, it can be just drifting in. So there's another source of contamination that I want to mention. Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Beatty.
much.
Anybody else? Yes, please, come forward. Yeah, come up, please.
Will Addis of 117 Bayview, and I'd second what BD has mentioned in just thanking you for putting attention to this. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but with the power of generative AI, I thought that I would just share what the global world has to say about regulating or banning pesticides. A lot of it builds a lot on what Joanne was mentioning. So a question that I asked was, should pesticides be banned? And it says, Arguments for banning pesticides. Health risks. Pesticides can pose significant health risks, including respiratory issues, neurological problems, and cancer. Vulnerable groups such as children and pregnant women are particularly at risk. Number 2, environmental impact. Pesticides can harm non-target species, including beneficial insects like bees, and contaminate soil and water, leading to ecosystem disruption and biodiversity loss. Number 3, resistance development. Pests can develop resistance to pesticides over time, leading to increased use and need for stronger chemicals, which exacerbates the environmental and health problems. Safer alternatives. Non-chemical methods such as integrated pest management and organic farming techniques can manage pests effectively without the associated risk of chemical pesticides. Arguments against banning pesticides. Agricultural productivity. Pesticides play a crucial role in protecting crops from pests and diseases, which helps ensure food security and high agricultural yields. When I think of that, I think about where we are and thinking about the town or the village district, and might this ordinance apply differently from a village district to someone who's in a rural district who actually relies on their crop for income. So I'm not sure if that's as part of the ordinance or if Jeremy's thought about that. But there seems to be a different use case for someone that is living in a densely populated area than an agricultural perspective. Economic impact. The use of pesticides can reduce crop losses and increase profitability for farmers, supporting livelihoods and economies dependent on agriculture. Pest control. In many cases, pesticides are effective in managing pests and preventing infestations that can otherwise lead to significant economic and health problems. And regulation versus ban. Instead of a complete ban, improving regulations can encourage safer use practices, may address health and environmental concerns while still benefiting the advantages of pesticides, which is what we're talking about now. In summary, while there are compelling reasons to consider reducing or regulating pesticides more strictly, a blanket ban may not be as practical due to its impact on agriculture and food security. Now, I mentioned that with the caveat is that are we focused on agriculture and food security in the people who are applying pesticides? Or are we focused on a greener lawn? And so, although I'm happy we're having this conversation, I think we're wasting a little bit of time here, and that we should just be thinking about a full ban. So I asked the question is, can you use lead paint? No, lead paint should not be used due to its serious health risks. Lead is a toxic substance that can cause severe health issues, particularly in children, such as development delays, learning difficulties, and behavioral problems. In adults, lead exposure can lead to neurological and cardiovascular issues, among other health problems. Many countries, including the US, have banned the use of lead-based paints in residential and commercial buildings. Regulations require that if lead paint is present in older buildings, it must be properly managed or removed to prevent exposure. Using lead paint today is both unsafe and illegal in many places, and alternatives with safer compositions are widely available. So we don't live in a world where we haven't banned a substance for health, human health reasons. Why can't it be that we have a full ban on pesticides? It doesn't mean that, from an economic standpoint, True Green or Turf Doctor has an organic option. People are still going to purchase that. Turf Doctor is still going to apply that. We're going to live in a safer place. We won't have to worry about avoiding a home for 2 days. We won't have to worry about additional time from Jeremy for abutting neighbors. Lawns will still be green. It's just going to be a safer alternative, much like how we're not using lead paint today.
Thank you, Will.
I have just one.
Chris?
As you know, we talked earlier that I'm also working on the code for the traffic piece. And in that discussion with Randy on the traffic code, we're taking away a lot of things that are duplicate that's already in state law. But to Allison's point, if we're using this as well for an educational means to make sure people are aware of the law and the limitations, I think there are a few pieces of definition so that you're using common language from what is the Chapter 258A Board of Pesticides Control from the state. I don't think it's any harm for the document to include some of the specific definitions that are in there that may help with the questions like Allison had about So what does that mean? Can someone just tell me to go ahead and apply this thing who's already, and there is actually a piece about under the supervision of a applicator. But they, as you know, you've looked at this, this is more for others, but there's a few words that maybe you'd want to, even though it's already in 1471C, it probably wouldn't be of great harm to add a few of those and use that language in this code too. Like, for example, licensed applicator, looking at this particular list, is actually not one of the words that's used. It's something else. So I think, yeah, it's a short list that I took some quick notes on to say, like certified applicator, commercial applicator, private applicator. Those are words that are already used. So use the same words to be consistent. They're there. The definitions are there. It doesn't mean to say, oh, take the whole list of 30 items and define them, but just maybe some of those that might be educational.
Yeah,
Some additional ones. that you
I'll look
haven't
at, I'll
done.
look at them, and I get your point, and I understand and I appreciate it. What I did not try to do was try to create something that was overly complicated,
right.
that had a lot of words in it, because that's when you need to start defining and have lots of definitions. You'll note that there are 4 definitions here, and herbicide says see pesticide. So there's really 3 definitions in this whole code. But I get your point, and I will look at the
That's-
licensed applicator piece in particular, because
Like
I
for-
think that's really what this applies to, those people. And I think that's what really needs to.
And herbicides is not defined the way you just did in the law. So I would just make sure that the definitions are consistent and you're using the same language so that it ultimately makes it long-term easier.
Understood. I
That's all.
did have these conversations with Alex from the executive director there, and he thought the definitions were sufficed and
Okay.
worked. But I get your point, and I'll look at clarifying it for a public hearing, hopefully on August 20th is my hope.
I think.
I would add, interesting, today, just before, while we were sitting here, I just saw on CNN that the EPA, for the first time since 1983, did an emergency ban on a herbicide, Daclethol. This is the first time they've done an emergency ban, outright ban of it since 1983, and that happened today. It's used on lawns, it's used on strawberries, it's used on a lot of food that we eat every day. And also, you probably don't want to hear this, but herbicides, and you probably can imagine, PFAS, and something that is now, the state's now starting to look at, I think it's called TFOS, are in herbicides and pesticides. So not only are they applying the herbicide, which is killing the pest, there's PFAS and TFOS in those herbicides as well. So it's a significant issue.
Is anybody else from the public? Yes, Cynthia, please.
Hi, Cynthia Stanchoff on 2 Spring Street. I think this is great that you're doing something about pesticides and herbicides, but I just want to comment that I only moved here in November, and so this is my first growing season here, and I have noticed that there are like 0 bees in my garden, and I have a really big yard that's full of weeds and all kinds of things flowering, but so few pollinator insects, and I just hope that whatever wording you have in this and whatever provisions in this ordinance, the end result is to reduce the use of pesticides and herbicides in Camden, along with, of course, just general public information, education, but to reduce it would be great.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anybody else? Dave, yes, please.
Cynthia, that's a great point, and I think that was the intent and the discussion that we had the last time on July 3rd, was to start this conversation. This is that one way to start notifying, and people become aware that what herbicides actually are and how much it's being actually applied in town, and then we'll hopefully take things further at some point.
So this takes me back to my college years of, environmental science, and pesticides is a broader category. When you say pesticides, you also are talking about rodenticides, algicides, and these are all things that get included when you use the word pesticide. So this is like something you really have to think about when you start doing this because, you get into the rodent control type of thing and that can expand the whole scope of, and I'm sure Jeremy's looked at it, but it's very important.
Dave, can you kind of wrap up a broader point? Like, what is your, are you thinking that this is a step in the right direction, or you?
I do, and
Okay.
I think it's a good thing, but it encompasses a lot of different things, and it reaches out into a lot of categories of what people do around their home. They're trying to take care of rodents. They're trying to put things on their boats. They're trying to, this is like, it reaches a lot of different places. So it's really complicated. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think Jeremy's doing the right thing. I just want to support what you're doing, and I think you just really got to think about it really carefully.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Right, which is the argument for it taking longer to actually create any kind of restriction. But rather than waiting, I really appreciate that you said, let's move forward with what we can, which is
It's an
the
educational.
educational part. Like, we need to know more about what's being applied. People are just going to think about it a tiny bit more. I know I'll think about it. I don't put anything on my lawn, but if I did and I had to say, put a bunch of signs out, I might be like, hold on, do I really need to do that? And
Your neighbors want to see all
we're going
those
to collect
signs.
information that's going to be really helpful for coming up with, I think, the ordinance that Will would like to see. This is rather than just waiting until we have that all perfect, which may, never come. I'm thrilled that we're going to get something on the ballot for this time.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy.
Can you schedule a hearing for this on August 20th, please?
Be my last act.
Okay, perfect. I think it's maybe already at the newspapers, ready
Thank-
for it. So
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Moving on, still with item 7, discussion items, and this would be an advisory vote on the Historic Preservation Code Amendment. And I know we have Chris Frieden here tonight, who is our head of our Historic Resources Committee. Chris, if you could give us an introduction to this one.
It's good and thick. Oh, okay.
How do I get into the computer? Would these be part ultimately of the board packet, or how does it get included in the board packet?
There you go.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, Chris, this is Chris's presentation.
It's an add-on, so some people won't do it at all.
Thank you guys for having us. I know it's late. We're going to try and move through this really fast. I know that this document is not part of the packet, but I've left you a printed copy of it, and we'll move through this fast. So I am Chris Frieden with the Historic Resources Committee. I'm the current chair. I have Pat Scaling here with us, who is the past chair, and Danny Solomon, who's a member of the HRC, and he was the former director of the hatchery program, Cameron Hills. And we're here to talk about what you're calling an advisory vote for a historic preservation ordinance. And we're here because, as the HRC, one of our duties is to recommend ordinances for the purposes of historic preservation within the town. So I thought we'd start with what is a historic preservation ordinance. And I think before you can define that, you kind of have to define what is preservation. And preservation is the act or process of applying measures necessary to sustain the existing form, integrity, and materials of a historic property. And a historic preservation ordinance is a local statute. Am I off mic? Thanks. Thank you. A historic preservation ordinance is a local statute enacted to protect buildings, neighborhoods from destruction or insensitive rehabilitation. It's also a way to maintain community pride, heritage, and history, and protects investment of residents, positively impacts the local economy through tourism, and enhances business recruitment. So what is in a historic preservation ordinance? Well, the basic components are a statement of purpose and definitions, Then it establishes a preservation commission. It's usually a 5-person commission that approves applications on the basis of the historic preservation ordinance. It has a criteria for historic designation. It has a review process, an enforcement element, and an appeals process. Those are the basic elements. Oops, wrong way here. So the conversation around historic preservation ordinance in Camden is a long one. It's gone on for at least 15 years, if not longer. And it's really been an evolving conversation. And I was going to ask Pat to speak a little bit to the history of historical preservation here in Camden.
Pat Scaling, a Camden resident. So when Chris asked me to speak, he said I had 1 minute, so I'm going to talk fast. And I want you to know that I've chopped this down to the minimum, and it's nowhere near as interesting as it would be if you got the full version. So if anybody's interested, I'd be glad to email you the full version before I chopped it. Okay. Historic Preservation Ordinance for Camden is not a new idea. It's been under consideration as far back as December 2009 and probably before that, but that's the first I know. When the planning board had a roundtable discussion concerning downtown zoning, and some of those principal players at the time, you'll recognize Mark DiMichele, Christopher Glass, Richard Householder. Those are all names that you may or may not know, according to how long you've been here. At that time, the planning board was looking for a way to guide growth and downtown development while encouraging the preservation of the historic character of the town. Then early in 2010, the planning board decided to move forward, work on a proposal to form a specific committee to work on review criteria and a process for creating a preservation ordinance. In April of 2011, the subcommittee presented a proposal of an ordinance which included creating a commission of 7 people. After the third public hearing and amendments, an ordinance proposal finally reached the select board. The select board decided not to send it to a public vote at that time because they felt the timing and the support were not right, and the town just wasn't ready. I'm leaving out all the gory details. So fast forward to 2014, 2015, Meg Barclay was the chair of the Historic Resources Committee, and she toyed with the idea of a preservation ordinance for Camden and did extensive research into the concept of Maine's Certified Local Government, CLG, and its benefits to Maine towns, one of which, qualified towns, one of their benefits, the CLG benefits, was it qualified towns for state and federal money for historic preservation projects, and towns only became eligible for that CLG money if they had an approved historic preservation ordinance, which Camden does not, and we've never been able to get much state or federal money for historic preservation. So where are we? So when Meg's term ended, the committee kind of put it on the back burner and focused on other issues. In 2016, the Historic Resource Committee began educating itself, studying existing HPOs from other Maine towns and other states, and then wrote a proposal for a full-blown historic preservation ordinance, which Jeremy will remember, for Camden, and also Allison probably has fond memories of that too, with timelines and process flow charts. But in the end, the committee felt that there was some resistance for pursuing a full-blown historic preservation ordinance. We were a little timid. So in July 2019, we presented a component from our comprehensive HPO, which only was the step for the demolition delay ordinance. It gained the support of the planning board and the development office, and the select board was placed on the November 2021 ballot, passed overwhelmingly, and was approved by the citizens of Camden. And I hope I didn't speak
That's
too long.
beautiful.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you very much, Pat. This is a good time also for me to acknowledge that, as you can tell, this has been a super long process. We've been working on this for a very long time. We've worked with both of our last two liaisons. Chris Fessel is here, Rhonda Reisner from the Historic Resources Committee. This has been the primary thing we've been working on for the past year. So a lot of people have put a lot of effort into developing this and addressing this issue. Just to acknowledge another thing, lately we've had some issues in town that have kind of shown evolving feelings about a historical preservation ordinance. Jeremy pointed out to me that he was surprised by the level of interest in the Chestnut Street demolition, and we had a pretty good turnout from the public when we had a hearing on that. Just recently we conducted the Chestnut Street Historic District Walk as part of the Janes Walk, and we had a huge turnout. And the conversation that kept coming up was people wanting to know what was being done to preserve these beautiful old houses and keeping this district the way it was. That was a real theme of the whole walk. It was a persistent question. So I think there's a lot of appetite for this in the town. So why does Camden need a historical preservation ordinance? Well, we're in the midst of generational change. We've had a large in-migration to Maine. We're currently 9th in the country in terms of in-migration. And so that means that properties and businesses are changing hands. And people are continually shocked by how little protection currently exists. Right now, the only thing we can do as the HRC is delay a demolition, for example, 120 days. We can't stop a demolition. We can only delay it. And I think people in town incorrectly assume, this is actually a quote from the National Trust, that citizens incorrectly assume a property listed on the National Register or in a historic district is protected. HPOs need to be enacted by local governments to secure a community's heritage and guard its businesses against the devaluing effects of inappropriate development. So how does an HPO benefit Camden? Well, first and foremost, it will provide guidance on restoration and renovation for anyone who has a project. There's a design guide is an element of historical preservation ordinance, so they will get guidance and education. It will help preserve Camden's identity, which draws tourism into town, and tourists come for our aesthetic, our architecture, and our history. It strengthens the local economy. Historic preservation attracts families and new businesses by demonstrating public commitment to its community. Properties within historic districts appreciate faster than communities as a whole, and that value is protected from market fluctuation. Also, tax-exempt bonds, strategic planning, and historic preservation accounts for almost 30% of small-town economies across the United States. So now this moves on to another feature of what we're talking about with the historic preservation ordinance, is that is we would want a component of deconstruction and reuse within our historical preservation ordinance, and Danny's here to talk about that.
I'll be very brief as well. So Danny Solomon, Camden resident. Some of you may know already, deconstruction is a really promising alternative to demolition that is gaining a lot of momentum in this country. So deconstruction is the selective dismantling of building components to maximize materials for reuse, repurposing, and recycling, and to mitigate unnecessary waste. Only in the past 8 years or so has policy actually been crafted around mandating deconstruction in certain cities in the US, and it's been very successful. Obviously, there are a lot of environmental and economic benefits, but also for the purpose of historic preservation as an alternative to, either a building being saved and restored or being demolished. Of course, the primary goal is to save buildings, whole. But even the selective dismantling materials, a lot of materials in historic buildings are very hard to access today. So that provides an opportunity for other buildings to be saved. So I am actually right now in a professional transition to hopefully start a deconstruction reuse program locally that hopefully policy can help support.
Thank you, Danny. And then the last benefit we listed here is, as mentioned by Pat, is a certified local government, or a CLG, which makes the town available to certain tax credits and funding. And Jeremy was going to talk a little bit about, his experience with CLGs.
Sure. I've been doing a whole lot of everything in my life in municipalities. So historic preservation is another one. I used to be the historic preservation coordinator for CLG coordinator for the city of Bangor, which had they were one of 11 towns in the state that has a certified local government historic preservation ordinance. It does facilitate, if you do have it, like Pat said, are able to get funding from the State Historic Preservation Commission, which receives an annual allocation from the National Park Service. And that comes to the state, and then the state is required to pass those funds out to a certain percentage of those funds to certified local governments. Right now, they're only able to pass those out to 11 towns in the state. Castine, York, Topsom, I think, Bangor, Hollowell, Gardner, I think. I will say people have had, I think there's people talk about it being a challenge or a struggle for property owners. I've never really found that it's complicated or overly burdensome. Yes, it's another step that someone has to do, but generally I think people that have significant historic properties want to do the right thing. And a lot of times there's not a lot of resources out there on how to treat historic properties appropriately, because there are manuals and there are standards and guidelines that the National Park Service creates for CLGs, and you incorporate those into your code of ordinances, and those are documents that are available. And then the Historic Preservation Commission that oversees this does provide and can provide community outreach, technical assistance, and those kind of things to property owners and contractors that are looking to do work on a historic property. There's a lot of benefits. I was speaking with the Friends of the Curtis Island Light folks the other day when they had their presentation on the work that was done on the assessment work done on Curtis Island. And Donovan Ripkema, he's a professor from at University of Pennsylvania, has written a book on, and he speaks nationally on this issue, the economics and the economic benefits of historic preservation. He's a fascinating guy, well worth a read. I actually gave the book to Chris to read to prep for this, and I think it's there's a lot of benefits to it, and certainly the benefits outweigh the negatives in my opinion. I think
Thanks,
it's
Jeremy.
appropriate following this path. When I got here about 7 years ago, I met with Pat, was one of the first people I met in town, and the Historic Resources Committee. And this has been, like she said, this has been ongoing for a long time. And it seems like, that trajectory is kind of continuing that appropriate way up, I think, especially with the overwhelming support that the demo delay provision got approved by voters. That was the first time that something historic went to voters, and it overwhelmingly was approved by voters. I think probably 75-25 a few years ago. So,
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And Michael Scaling's here with Curtis Island, and I think that is a potential project that could really benefit from CLG dollars. Success of HPOs in Maine. Right now, we're a little behind. There are 20 towns in Maine that have a historical preservation ordinance, and 11 are certified local governments. And I've spoken to about 7 different towns, their town planners or members of their commission, to kind of get success stories, like how is it working for you? And I just included a couple of the quotes. I taught a bit from Biddeford here in Kennebunk, and I really like the quote from York, that an HPO maintains value in historic districts. Character can't be separated from history. Visitors and residents look for that character. Some towns try to recapture history, but we don't want to wait until a beloved building is gone. So what are some of the features that would be in a Camden HPO? Well, I want to make it really clear what wouldn't be in it. An HPO does not turn Camden into a homeowners association. It's not regulating details like exterior paint. Doesn't drill down to that kind of level of specificity. It will only apply to existing historic districts, sites, and landmarks on the National Registry. And the broad intent is to preserve the community character and the streetscape. So it establishes a historic preservation commission that first reviews an application, and when they then issue a certificate, it moves on to town planning and goes through the regular steps of approval. So this is just one pre-approval step to make sure we're meeting what's sketched out in the historic preservation ordinance. And in speaking to comparable towns like York and Castine and Biddeford, none of them really gave me a case where they actually had denied an application, that it was always became an ongoing conversation with an applicant. So it's a way that preserving history becomes a conversation with the town. It's not an onerous, everybody's applications are being denied. That is not the case throughout the state and would not be the case here. So we took an approach with article language that was very similar to the tannery article, where we were looking for the town and for you to approve language like this for the November ballot, where the town is just green-lighting us moving forward with the drafting of the ordinance itself with public input. And then the town would vote on the entire ordinance next year, presumably in November, but if we can move it to June, that would be great. But I suspect that when we involve the select board, planning, legal, it probably will be next November. But right now, we just want to get the town to say, yes, move forward with this. We are in favor, and we've got the wind at our sails as we go through the drafting process. So this language is different than what is in the package. I worked with Jeremy to kind of change the language a little bit. So this is the proposed text, and obviously it can be edited, revised, but this is what we are proposing. Are you in favor of a historic preservation ordinance for the existing registered historic districts, sites, and landmarks in the town of Camden for voter approval on a 2025 ballot? In conclusion, historic preservation is a vital conversation with our past about our future. And once a historic building is gone, it's gone forever. And so we, the HRC, are asking for the select board to approve this non-binding article or advisory vote on the November warrant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. If you could stay up, I think we're going to maybe have to field a few questions.
Well, the first question is, we're not voting tonight, correct? Or are we?
We're not voting tonight. This is a discussion item.
All right, because it says advisory vote. But anyway, I had something else, but I lost it. It's okay. No, that's all. I just want to make sure that, even though it
Sure.
said that.
Allison?
So I've been the liaison to the Historic Resources Committee since, I don't know, for 7 years or something. And I'm so excited to see this as an option because so much time has been wasted speculating about whether or not the select board is going to support something. And it's been a really grueling process for people involved that really become educated about this. And then they have to present, in the past, it's been sometimes to the planning board or to the select board. And then as a select board liaison, trying to say, do I think the rest of the select board is going to have the appetite for this? It's kind of complex. There is a lot to it. It takes a while to become informed. And every single time what happens is people do a ton of work. And then this is also in our comprehensive plan as one of the things that we're supposed to be working on. And every single time that people get their souls ripped out by usually the select board. And so the public doesn't even get a chance to vote on it. And you put so much work into every single detail. So this is, I maybe just change a couple words in the article to say this is gonna take away the stress for the select board, first of all, because we're not gonna have to speculate individually whether there's broad support for this kind of thing. And then we're gonna know that. And then we're gonna be able to take the next year, 6 months, however long, to focus on all the details that we really wanna care about, rather than having the interjections into the conversation that have happened before. Where nobody really wants this. This is a solution in search of a problem. And, and then people get spooked and they're like, oh, I don't want to be the one. So this is going to eliminate that by asking voters, hopefully we could ask them, move forward with the drafting or something so that it's clear that over a period, the ordinance language isn't 100% set, that there's going to be a period of input, but just directing everybody to get to work. So this is so awesome. Thank you. It's really gratifying, actually, to sit here and listen to the presentation you gave tonight after all these years of seeing people work hard on it. You really summarized it well. This is going to make a step forward for everybody, I think.
Thank you. But yeah, this very nice presentation. One thing that might help others in understanding the full scope of the areas that are impacted would be to show which real estate pieces this is going to. I know you mentioned saying, oh, this is the historic district, or this one's on the National Register, it's going to affect those. It's a good question to know. So which ones are they? You've addressed that, okay, it's not going to be affecting the color of paint you choose, but what does an ordinance like this affect as far as changes? For example, if someone wanted to put a 2-car garage onto Norumbega, is that a thing? Because it's exterior and it's different. What's the scope? And just a matter of, defining so people have more education on what this is, which areas is my house affected? People are going to wonder, what can I not do?
Yeah.
What are the limitations? Trying to define that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that'll definitely
part
come
of the
out in the process. Again, so much work's been done on it, and to have the committee do more and more and more, and then not get anywhere, that's the gut-wrenching thing, I think, for this whole group. So
Because that's a matter, a lot of it, different communities choose different
Correct.
historic preservation ordinances. So that's the big thing. So people have seen, oh, well, I know about this one in such and such a place. We don't have to choose all of the components
Right.
that are in such and such a place. And that's the part where we can have this community discussion about which little things are or are not important for our community. But we don't want to do that until we know that the general direction that people don't think that, the brick building across the street from us, the French and Brown building, could be torn down. Nothing can stop it except for this 120 delay thing. That's surprising to people. And so we can work out the details of what kinds of exceptions are there and how does the commission get chosen, and did the windows factor in or not? And there's a lot of latitude there.
And I think just to build on what Allison was saying and what Chris mentioned in one of the slides, there are, I think, 22 or something historic preservation ordinance in the state. Communities that have historic preservation ordinances, and 11 are certified local governments. So the National Park Service has certain criteria, minimum criteria, to become a certified local government. Clearly, there are some towns, 9 or 11 of them or whatever, that decided not to go that full all the way to that CLG status. So there's a way to find a middle ground on these kinds of things. But I think that's where, if this gets to voters, just to say yes or no, like, should the Historic Resources Committee continue drafting one? That's where those public discussions will happen. And we certainly have all the maps. We've got the our historic resources inventory. We have that in our office. The committee has it currently, and we would make that a public to everyone.
So if people were worried about, does this affect their residents, there's a place they can go now.
For sure.
And that's your office, Jeremy. They can go and validate.
Yeah, we can tell you if
I live in
we can
that
tell what
area.
properties are in a historic district or if there's historic landmarks. Yes.
Good.
We can do that.
Susan?
Does the process of becoming a certified local government depend on the creation of the ordinance, or do the two processes coincide? And who undertakes that exercise of becoming a certified local government?
Likely it would be myself and the Historic Resources Committee, depending on what the community decides they want to include in the historic preservation ordinance. So if it meets the requirements of the Park Services standards for a certified local government historic preservation ordinance, then that's the path you would go. If it doesn't meet those standards, that the community decides that we don't want to go all that way, you could still do a historic
So
preservation
you can
ordinance.
craft the ordinance depending on whether or not the ultimate goal is to become a certified local government or not.
Correct.
I see.
Yep.
But there are benefits to taking that,
There certainly are.
going that
There
distance.
certainly are.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Just to give one more piece of background, over the last 15 years, we have drafted in full 3 different historic preservation ordinances. I mean, they have been written, and it would be a continued process of revising those documents after we had the green light from the public. But we would absolutely provide the overlay map and show people what we're talking about. But the problem here is if you start specifying too much in this first ballot thing, now you're down negotiating the actual details of the ordinance itself, which has been the thing that has stopped us every time. So I think having it be a 2-part discussion, it's like, do you agree in principle that we should be doing this? And then we'll have a whole 12 months to drill down to those details.
And that was a conversation I had with Chris the other day when we met was, and I struggle with this still after being here almost 7 years, is, this every 6 months. And then, we're scheduling what the warrant's going to be here early September for November. So it's like, I think it's a year process, to be honest with you, to be fully open and honest. I think that's what it takes and that's what it deserves. The community input and getting involvement should probably be November, would likely be November. I think that's where you best plan, in my opinion.
Ken, please.
Thanks, Chris. And thanks. I want to point out that most of the Historic Resources Committee is here tonight and several more people. So thank you for for waiting to the end of the program and the presentation tonight, Chris. And I'm all in favor. I think this should be put before the townspeople, and I'm confident that given the background and what has happened in your walk and all, I think you're well poised for success here. I just have a quibble about the wording. It seems in the first line that we are voting on an ordinance. We're not voting on an ordinance. I think you need to say, are you in favor of preparing an ordinance?
Yeah, just
Funny,
change that to make it.
I've had the word drafting in there in every version, and I don't know why I dropped it at the last
Okay,
second.
good. Thank you, Chris.
There could even be a note that
You guys are going to
explains.
approve the wording eventually. So we'll prep it
Right.
for it, but you guys approve
Yeah.
wording for a warrant.
Okay. I am in favor of putting this before the voters. I think the Historic Resources Committee, potentially more than any other committee we have, is a committee of true believers. And if you hang out with them long enough, you might become one as well. Of course, it's people who have an active interest in historic preservation and the historic character of the town. So it is good for that committee who can be in that historic preservation bubble to get a good assessment of what the rest of the town is interested in. So I think this is a great thing to bring forward and see if this is what we want in Camden.
It's going to be a great opportunity for public input too, in a much better way than we typically do it, which is getting to this final stage when then we have a public hearing when it's really too late to change anything. This is going to bring on an onslaught of public input, and people are going to be forced to think about it because it's going to be put right in front. It's going to be a massive turnout for this election too. So it's our best opportunity to get a representative take on this. And then you're going to have all kinds of public input, I'm sure, on all the details. So.
And just one last thing I was going to mention is that if this does go to ballot, we are planning to support it however we can through articles in the paper, through social media. So we will be doing what we can to educate the public about what this ordinance really is about and why, our advocacy for it. So.
Any other comments or questions from the people here tonight? Okay. I think, Chris, hearing the positive reaction from the board, we should prepare to just have a final draft for August 20th. Jeremy, Chris, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember what date for the warrant article language draft needs to be done, actually, but I will move forward as if you want to see it on the 20th.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to approve warrant articles on September 3rd.
Okay.
So we really ought to have, September 6th is our due date for the ballots.
Okay, perfect.
So last meeting before that is
Sounds good.
September 3rd. So we really ought to be approving warrant articles.
Perfect.
The
We'll have
verbiage
it.
on them.
We'll have it ready.
August
So there's
20th, so that we can have the official votes on what goes on the ballot on September
6th
3rd.
or 3rd.
September 3rd.
That sounds good.
Okay.
No worries.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Moving on with discussion items, we're to the citizens petition for the carbon cashback. I see Cynthia here. Would you like to start us off with this?
Okay, Cynthia Stanchoff, 2 Spring Street. The article that I'm proposing for the ballot, and I didn't really know what tonight's meeting was about because I didn't get any formal invitation to come or anything. So I'm not sure what it is that I'm here to do, but I circulated a petition at your suggestion and got 331 signatures on it, supporting the notion of an article being on the ballot in November that would enable the town of Camden to join a number of other towns around the state that are calling on our members of Congress to take strong climate action by enacting a federal climate-related policy, the intention of which is to reduce carbon pollution on an economy-wide basis and simultaneously stimulate renewable clean energy economy and in a system called a carbon fee and dividend. And I don't know if you want me to go into that or not. Do you have questions or?
No, I think that you've covered it well, Cynthia. We do have questions for certain. I don't think you need to go any further, but congratulations on getting the signature.
Thank you.
Well done.
Met a lot of good people in the process. It was really fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you generated a lot of broad support for this, and I hope you're successful in November. Board, any questions or comments for Cynthia or on questions about this particular?
Well, just can we be clear so that for the public that they understand what the rules are and what leeway we have or do not have related to when someone brings a petition, the benefit of doing that and getting something on the ballot?
Sure. Audrey, can you clarify? I mean, this is going on the ballot regardless of select board.
No, we still have to.
We still approve.
You still have to put it on
Okay.
the
Yeah,
ballot.
on the warrant article.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at this point, I think it's well earned and well deserved. And
Yeah, and I mean,
Appropriate.
all the, there are circumstances when you wouldn't do this, like if there was a competing warrant article that the select board was working on, but that's not the case here. So, kind of the normal, reasonable circumstances around why you might not put this on the ballot, really, there's nothing that would sort of apply to this.
So again, the rules are that in order for
But
a
she collect-
community member to have something on the ballot is they do a petition, get 10% of the voters in the town.
10% of the voters in the previous gubernatorial election, to be specific.
thank you. There we go.
Right,
Very
that
good.
hasn't been said yet. I think some of us remember that Cynthia came before us. But yeah, like Chris is saying, that we can the select board can choose to put something on the ballot, or if the select board doesn't want to do that on their own, which is the case before when Cynthia came to us, that it didn't rise to the level of something the select board was going to propose on our own. The alternative is to go and get signatures. And most people don't actually take the step of doing that. But I think it's really awesome that rather than just doing this some other towns have done it as a policy, as just a select board vote, which actually has no real meaning that lasts beyond select board members. This is actually going on the ballot, and you got all of the support and sort of public engagement that went along with getting those signatures. So I know it was onerous, but I think the objective of what you're trying to achieve is actually better served by the process that you did go through.
Honestly, I do too, because the purpose is, there are a couple purposes. It's educating people about climate policy, but it's also giving agency to individuals that they can't have on their own, really, but as a collective voice of a whole town, especially a town as prominent as Camden, that can get the attention of Congress. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity.
It's much better to be able to say this was a citizen-initiated thing than just something the select board decided to put on the ballot. So
Right.
thank you for doing that.
So Cynthia, just to give you an update, this will be one of the warrant articles that I presume we will approve probably on August 20th, the verbiage for it, and then on September 3rd to make it formal for the November ballot.
Yes.
I think the verbiage will be exactly as
As it's written, it has to be as.
Okay, okay.
yeah, As they
All right, good.
collected.
And then
So
it'll
we will
be-
still approve it.
And then it will say that it was a citizen. There will be something for the voters that indicates.
It's a citizen's petition.
Right.
Yep.
Right, and we won't take the opportunity to say that the select board either approves or disapproves. We won't say anything at all.
No.
Right.
They don't need you for this one.
Right. Any other comments or questions from the public tonight on this one? Board, anything else on this one? Okay. Last agenda item tonight is the MPERS Public Safety Plan 3C retirement option. Audra, can you give us a background on that?
Was there
Can we
something I
table
was,
this one?
What's that?
Well, this should be quick, I hope.
Yeah, so this is,
I didn't see it.
it's being requested to be placed on the ballot. It needs approval by the citizenry. It's to change the main public employee retirement system plan for anybody who works in public safety for the town of Camden. So
No.
we can answer questions and give you details about what it looks like. I think the main thing that you need to know is that it's been budgeted for, so there are funds available to do this. It's really just going to voters for approval to change the retirement plan option that's offered for firefighters and EMTs and then police officers.
Allison?
I mean, there's nothing in the packet about this. I assume it's something positive that we'll end up thinking that we need to do, but I don't have any, my instinct is, hold on, it's a different retirement benefit package for some categories of our employees, but not others, which we all know often doesn't end well with, because we're making a, look at what the county did when they all of a sudden decide to give a benefit to a certain group of employees and not talk about what the difference is for all the others. I'm going to need to know more about this.
Yeah, and I mean, I believe that this is only, only public safety officials are eligible for this type of retirement plan.
can you give us a broad sense of what the pros and cons of this is or
And the
how
budgetary
substantial?
implications.
Jody's popped up, and I believe she did that because she is better placed than I am to answer any specific questions about the difference between this plan and the plan that they're currently on.
I mean, it's kind of like the why are they, it's hard to tell. Yeah, we don't have answers yet. So thank you.
Jody, please.
Yeah, this is, Allison, or Audra was right, this is only offered to first responders, fire, police, fire, and EMS. And it's basically regionally offered to, municipalities offer this to their employees. So Camden is one of the few that doesn't in this case. The difference is right now the police department and the fire department currently participate in the 2C plan in the main PERS, main public employee retirement system. And a couple of differences. In the 2C plan, the employer contributes 11.8% towards their retirement, of their 11.8% of their gross wages. And the employee contributes 8.5%. Under the 3C plan, the employer contributes 12.8%, and the employee has to kick in 9.2%. That doesn't change the retirement age. It's still 25 years of service and no age limit, so it doesn't affect anybody's ability to retire at a planned age. And then there's the benefit calculation once they are retired. Under the 2C plan, the way that they calculate their retirement benefit is they take 50% of the average of the highest 3 years of their earnings, and they base it off of that, and that's what they would receive, and then 2% for each year of service beyond their 25 years. And under the 3C plan, it is 66.67% of the average of the 3 highest years of earnings, and also 2% for each year of service beyond 25 years. So this has been a tool, a recruitment tool for other municipalities, and we're just trying to stay competitive in that manner. So this is why, and we do need to have it placed on the ballot for a town vote.
What are the budgetary implications? Like, for example, at our current staffing level, what are we going to look at for increased budget? Is there any projection for that, Jody?
I had that available. I can look for it. It was not a whole lot because it's only involving 2 departments. I can look for it. I honestly don't have it right now because we've already budgeted for it. It's already in the budget.
For 1 year.
I'm sorry?
For 1 year? It's in
For
the budget.
FY25.
I just have no idea how much money we're talking about. Like, not even, I don't know if we're talking about $500 or $50,000 or.
Yeah, it's a 1% increase in town contribution. So if I can do a really quick.
Could something just be written up and
Yeah,
sent to us?
I actually agree with Allison. I think that we should get something in the packet for August 20th so we can have a good.
I overall don't even understand how the retirement system works and how the budgetary implications for us for any of the town employees. This is not something that I have a strong foundation with to begin with. So this 1%, 2%, 2C, 5C is all like a whole new language for me.
Chief, my biggest curiosity for you is how you think this, obviously you think this is going to help you recruit and retain, but go ahead, floor's yours.
Yeah, so we talked about this back in October, 10 months ago. We talked about it during the budget process. So we are currently advertising for 3 positions, 2 that were authorized in the budget to hire September 1st and 1 on November 1st. In my quick review of other fire departments that are currently advertising, they all offer the planned 3C retirement. Rockland does, Rockport does, Ellsworth. And the list I have there, we're one of the few that do not offer this, so that makes us less competitive as an employer.
Do we offer any other benefits that some other places don't? I mean, is this the only thing that people are looking at?
So, what we have to offer for benefits, right, are wages, healthcare, and retirement. I mean, those are the big 3 things that people look for.
I just really need something to be written up and so that I can read it. I'm sure it's very logical that I would probably support it, but I just would really need to see a memo explaining it.
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah, what do you, just so we can get you what you're looking for, what?
We'd like to see the budgetary implications primarily, I think, Chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
In a comparison of, and also like you mentioned some towns. So if you could, I mean, if it really is truly all the towns locally, what towns offer this?
Yeah, sure. And I believe, if I recall, the budget for the fire department, implication for the fire department was a $15,000. It was a less than $15,000 increase. And Jody's shaking her head.
Yeah, I just figured it out. The fire department is $10,000, around $10,000 difference, and the police department is around $5,400.
At its
So that's,
current staffing?
yeah.
Is that with the new people that we would be hiring?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Why does
That
this need a
includes those
town
three.
vote?
Okay.
Why does this
That's
need
just
a,
the rules of the Maine public employee retirement system.
Right.
It's,
is
this
this going to
happens
lead
a
to
lot
other
where it's
employees not
written-
feeling?
what's that?
So why aren't we doing this for everybody? And is this going to
We
lead?
can't, the Maine PERS only offers it to public safety employees. And I believe that it's created by the legislature. And I think it was in response to difficulties in recruiting and hiring people all across the public safety spectrum, from police to fire to EMS.
for the
And
state?
because it was written by the state and they don't understand how municipalities work, they're constantly saying that your legislative body needs to make the decision, because they think everyone's a city council and they don't understand that town's legislative body is the citizenry. So it's really, this is pretty common when you see a goofy thing that ends up going to voters for approval. It's because it was written by the state legislature and they don't understand municipalities.
We ought to hire a lobbyist to.
Like MMA?
Like MMA, right?
Go ahead, Chris.
I have back to the budget questions, probably for Jody. Again, as you said, it's for 2C, it's a 50% of the average 3 years is retirement. 3C, 66.67% of the salary. So and I understand that it's, a 1% increase of current salary per person that it applies to, that additionally comes out of the town's budget. That difference of the 16.67%, is that comes out of Maine PERS directly, or does that come out of the town's budget? In other words, just trying to educate others. If a person retires, they're under Maine PERS. The first responder retires, it's Maine PERS, it's out of Maine PERS' budget where that 50 or 66.67. So in other words, if we did this, the town is not then having to pay an additional 16.7% for each retired employee. Is that correct? I'm just trying to
Correct. Yeah,
state
it's
it so that
the state of Maine
it's
retirement
something that
system.
people might be worried
That's
about.
helpful, yeah.
That's going to be
Yes.
that's why there's maybe the surprise in that, okay, it's not a huge budget increase. It's not a 16.67 budget increase that we don't want to be a company that has to pay
Right.
an increased retirement. It's handled through the payroll deductions. That's where it's seen. It's not, a person's retirement check doesn't come from the town.
Right. Comes from the retirement system.
I just wanted to make sure that.
It's good to know.
I
Thank
said
you.
the
That's
basis on
educational
that.
to me. I hadn't realized that. It's a state burden. So it actually is in some ways a benefit to the town of Camden to take better advantage of the state burden to recruit quality employees to us.
Right.
Matt, I know you
Yeah.
want, come on up, please.
That is a helpful,
Our
that'd be,
cost
that'd
is
be
that
great for a
1%.
memo.
Yep.
Yeah, just to answer your question, so that 16% difference. So like for me, I've been on the 50% for 5-7 years or something. So when we go to 66, I'll actually only get like 60% when I retire, because they average out those percentages.
Bad.
So yeah, which is fine. But then every, if we postpone this another year, I'll only get 59% or whatever it is, 59.5, however that drops. So the longer we wait, the less percentage an employee gets at the end.
Right, yeah, it's better for the employees to do this faster, because otherwise it is prorated throughout the time.
Right.
It's not going to make a difference for me.
Right.
Another helpful way of
It
saying
won't
it.
make, it won't make much, yeah, you get an extra cup of, but the important thing in just letting people understand that it's not, because it's what, there aren't many retirement programs left in the world
Exactly.
through companies because of the retirement burden. And this is not a case where this puts a huge retirement burden on the town. It still is Maine PERS. It's the 1% additional per payroll
And the
for
employees-
active employees.
and the
And the
employees
employee has to
contribute
do a little bit too, which goes to Maine PERS. But as you said more succinctly, we pay a little bit to get a lot of benefit from the state paying when it comes to retention and understanding what's there.
No, that was really helpful because I'm just not familiar with retirement. I mean, that's the thing is most people's jobs don't include that. And so that makes sense.
The workforce development benefit for Camden far outweighs the cost to Camden. I'm
Right.
very comfortable moving forward with this as a, now that we've come, increased our knowledge through this discussion, moving this to a ballot.
A ballot thing, but on the 20th, can we have in the packet?
Public hearing.
Like
Yeah,
a-
we
An
can,
explanation that can
we
be.
can still give you the memo
Because
that
I'm
one
gonna have
lays
to
all out.
train it to
One
less,
page.
maybe even a paragraph, or
Sure.
maybe you could write it, Chris. No.
the one-page thing of this is what it is and the
Yeah, yeah.
implications.
Yep. Okay.
I think this is an example of forgetting what people don't know. Or I'm just way less intelligent than the average person.
No,
But
no,
this is
most,
just like-
most people don't understand.
This is,
Maine
yeah.
public employee retirement system.
No, it's good questions, good conversation.
Anybody else have any other questions? Ken? No? Anything else from the public on this one? Okay, good. That's
Thank you.
one more to get on the November ballot. Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Matt. All right, item 8 on tonight's agenda is adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? 5-0, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a lot to ask for at the end.